Welcome to episode 127 of the Grip Strip podcast, the What's a Contract to You edition of the Grip Strip podcast. This week we'll be talking about all things motorsports as we always do, but a little different than usual. I'm still your host, Philip Matthew, coming off of a 600 series, so I'm feeling good about life. Bowling, and I'm still feeling it, but after bowling 8 games, but still bowled a 600. Bowled a 234 the last game. So happy about that. Bowling game's getting in shape. I need to just get back in the other aspect of the gym and the fitness so that I'm ready to go when the season starts next month. But going and pinch hitting, coming in relief for my usual co-host Josh Fine is our regular guest host in a sense, or contributor, a writer for Fansided and Beyond the Flag, a NASCAR aficionado, a man who has a car that sitting there looking at the money that's going to be coming along with that, along with being the caddy, because Ty Gibbs is getting reps in the Cup Series before he ends up going and taking over Joe Gibbs' racing car. But that's beside the point. Tyler Reddick gets the win. He made that announcement about going to 2311 for 24. There's still moving parts. I guess we'll talk about moving parts in regards to this silly season, because there are things that seem to be kind of settling into place for next year. There are, if you think about DBC, the one thing they're good for is some insider information. So charters and stuff that might be in play and some of the other discussions. They're not really good for much else, mainly because Brett Griffin sucks. But either way, we'll get into all that because Joe, of course, NASCAR guy. We'll talk about the whole weekend at Indianapolis. He had 2 races at the Indy Road Course, saw AJ Allmendinger win the XFinity race, a much-needed win for him based on the performance of colleague racing in the XFinity Series. Daniel Hemrick coming out on social media and basically saying he's not cutting it. And I mean, he's been very honest and very forthright in his career about his struggles. And I mean, I completely understand and appreciate it. I think the cars aren't that good in the Xfinity Series, but we'll talk about that. The Truck Series was somewhat carnage. John Hunter Nemechek hit everything but the lottery. He tried to hit Mega Millions. He went through Taylor Gray to do it, didn't. And then in the end, the winner was Grant Enfinger coming out of nowhere. GMS, another team that's been nowhere this year because they've went to Cup as well, putting a lot of energy into the 43 car especially. And that's helped to keep Eric Jones in the fold more than likely. But they've struggled in the Truck Series. Jack Wood wrecks every single week, so that probably doesn't help their cause. But Grant Enfinger getting a win, putting himself in position to advance to the round of 6 or whatever, which means he has no pressure for at least a race or so. There's going to be a long gap here as the rest of the season goes along. There's going to be gaps between races, so we'll see what happens with that. We'll also get into IndyCars. Alexander Rossi, who's been in the news, of course, months ago before all of this silly season stuff started. He was actually signed by Arrow McLaren SP months ago to take over a ride or become a third driver for them before Zach Brown decided he was going to sign anybody and everybody on planet Earth. No, neither myself or Joe are going to be driving for McLaren Racing, Arrow McLaren SP, McLaren F1.
Also not driving for Alpine in F1.
Or Alpine or anything like that. So, yeah, it's all good. You're a NASCAR guy. It's all good. We'll forgive you.
Thanks.
Joe's good for or Josh. I figure it's okay. I can correct you. You'd be all right with it. Josh, I go in and kick in on the pronunciations. The problem is it's like they give Chris Whittingham crap for being a fancy lad on the Lebitard show, or Jessica Smetana for the way she's able to speak French and do the F1 minute. because she's sexy and she's hot, minus the fact she went to Notre Dame, but whatever, we'll let that go. But she's a Lewis Hamilton fan, so I don't care. As long as you're a fan of something that I like and you're hot chick, then I'm probably going to like it. Sorry about that. So Rossi hasn't won in 3 years. He wins at Indy Road Course. He's going to move on to McLaren next year. A lot of stuff going on behind that. The points battle tightens up between Rose. What do you call? Why am I forgetting? I always forget his fucking name. He just had a great post too. He had a great post today about all the rumors in the Indy cars as well. That is such a fail. But the points battle is tightened up as they're going to Nashville. We'll talk about that. Maybe get into some of the rumors going on there. Max Verstappen likely, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that he's going to win the Formula One World Championship this year. But when you have Ferrari dick-stepping themselves on a regular basis, that helps. You have the better car. You may not have the one-lap pace, but you generally have the better overall car when the engine's not eating itself up. The Red Bull team's been bought out 50% by Porsche. They have the intellectual property of the Honda F1 engine, so now they're going to share that data with Porsche so that they can start building that engine, their engine, so that in 2026, when they have the new rules, they'll be able to go off and running and be right on track with everybody else. So that's convenient, typical Red Bull. We'll talk about them winning, and of course, Verstappen qualified 10th, had issues on Saturday, but because of Ferrari, didn't matter. Mercedes finished second and third. Sir Lewis Hamilton, at a track he's won at 8 times, goes and gets a second place finish, 5 consecutive podium finishes for the 7.5-time world champion, all-time winningest driver. Of course, my favorite driver, but if you listen to the show, I think you'd have probably picked that up. George Russell, unfortunately, he started on pole. Great lap by him on Saturday. Got a great start, led 30 laps, got passed on track by Ferrari, by Charles Leclerc, and then the pace kind of went away. They went on a one-stop. Similar strategy to Max Verstappen. It didn't work out so well for George. Lewis was on a 2-stopper. We'll get into all that. And then the craziness that started with the announcement of the legend Sebastian Vettel, one of the greatest F1 drivers in recent memory, announcing his retirement, started a domino effect that is still going on today, which we'll see Fred Alonso, his plan is now to go and take Lawrence Stroll's money and Saudi money to run in the back. So God bless him. He's just holding on like a angry old man, but whatever. If the check's clear, I guess it don't really matter. And that in turn left Alpine out to dry. Otmar Safnauer, who's quickly becoming a meme. I don't know if he wasn't one anyway when he was at the team that used to be Racing Point or Tracing Point or Stroll F1 or now is Aston Martin. He was a joke. But the situation that's going on there now with Oscar Piastri, the defending Formula 2 world champion, was announced. And then shortly after that, Oscar Piastri came out, a la Alex Palou, and said, no, I'm not driving for Alpine next year, with the likely scenario that he's going to McLaren, since it goes back to the whole point of Zach Brown signing anybody and everybody that is known to drive a race car and has a pulse. So I guess we'll see about that. So there's those pieces are in there. There's a whole bunch of other scenarios and stuff that people have been talking to on Instagram, friends of mine, like family that are into it. We're trying to figure out what could happen. I know for sure that the top 3 teams are not changing their drivers. The Mercedes group is not going to change their drivers. Ferrari's not going to change their drivers. They're going to have to change a lot of other stuff, but they're not going to change Leclerc and Sainz. And then, of course, Red Bull has committed to this duo, even though one-eyed Marco's already starting to shit on Checo Perez because he's had 2 bad races in a row. But I'd like to see if One-Eyed Marco can find anybody within his driver development program that could do a better job than Checo Perez, giving him the crap they give him. In the roundup, we'll talk about all three junior series at Hungary, F2, F3, and W series. Formula E ran in London, doubleheader. Supercars were at the Bend, coming back after a little break. World Superbikes came back from their summer break at the Czech Republic, but they'll have another month till their next race, so it's great scheduling by them. IMSA will be back this weekend at Road America. It won't be the Road America 500 as it was in the past. Of course, it'll be a 2-hour 45 race, but it will have all classes because it's, of course, a big track. MotoGP and Moto2 comes back from their summer hiatus for their first race, and they'll be back at Silverstone. NASCAR Cup and Xfinity will preview Joe and I for Michigan International Speedway, make some picks. Going back on the picks, essentially, Josh and I whiffed pretty good on them. We did pick Max Verstappen, which was basically a giveaway, I would say. And then we picked, I'm trying to go over here. Yeah, we both picked Max Verstappen. And then, what is it? I picked Nacho Libre to win, and then he was getting into it with his BFF Ryan Blaney. Oh, so Josh picked AJ Allmendinger. Okay, good for him. So he picked 2 out of the 3. I picked the one old guy.
Josh.
Josh is better at that. That's why he's the brains of the operation. Of course, he does have the algorithm. And he has picked winners at Talladega and Daytona before. He picked Tate Fogelman, and there was one other one he picked out of the algorithm that was good too. He didn't pick Brandon Brown, who doesn't have a job anymore, but I know he picked Tate Fogelman and one other one. But we'll bring that up again next week when he comes back. But yeah, and we'll also preview IndyCars at Nashville, and then. Whatever, we'll see where the show goes from there. So let's start with the Cup race, Joe. It was the Verizon 200 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, their road course, and it saw Tyler Reddick dominate, led 38 of the race's 86 laps. Christopher Bell and Ryan Blaney were the other 2 guys that really did all the leading. So it was essentially a 3-driver race. Reddick did not win any stages because he was going for the race win. Chase Briscoe actually won a stage, gets another playoff point, which for all intents and purposes really may not count for anything if he doesn't make it. But we'll see about that. And then Christopher Bell won the second stage. Which helps him in his chase to possibly get a first championship. And add to his Truck Series championship that he won a few years ago. A lot of guys scored stage points on Sunday. Some people that you wouldn't see very often. Cody Ware actually got a stage point. Ty Dillon got a stage point. You got some
Harrison
other people.
Burton got a stage point.
Harrison Burton and Todd Gilliland, Bubba Wallace on a road course. All these guys on a road. Well, Todd Gilliland actually qualified well. Harrison Burton didn't qualify bad at all. Bubba Wallace is on a little bit of a run, so the Maggots and the LCD are not very happy about it, but another top 5. We'll just go into the top 10. We'll kind of go from there. Tyler Reddick, Austin Cindric, Harrison Burton, Todd Gilliland. So all 3 rookies finished 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. There has to be some sort of record about if that's how many times. That might be the first time ever that 3 rookies finish in the top 5. Or I feel like I'm going way back when it might be 94 Pocono. Jeff Bodine wins the race. It was a race where the Hoosier tires were really strong, and it was like Ward Burton, Jeff Burton, and Joe Nemechek were all rookies in 1994, and they all were on Hoosier tires, and they all ran really well, and they finished in the top 5. I just kind of have this like weird memory. I'll go and check that in a minute, but
a strong memory.
Yeah, I have that sort of thing once in a while. Bubba Wallace gets another top 5 finish while they're sending out their save the dates for their wedding, him and Amanda, that they'll be having at the end of this year, with confetti popping out, no less. Joey Logano finishes 6th. AJ Allmendinger basically dying, finished 7th. No water, no air, looking like he wanted to die before that last restart. And that probably is why he didn't win that race, because I think he probably would have, or he would have at least given it a shot. Michael McDowell on the precipice, or on the going and giving up on the appeal. So his chances of making the playoffs are going to look much worse now. So a double top 10 finish for Front Row Motorsports, that doesn't really happen very often.
I think the last time, if I'm not mistaken, the last time that happened may have been when they won their first race at Talladega, when Reagan and Gilliland went 1-2. So it's been a while for them.
That sounds about right. I mean, we'll do a racing reference search here. I'll do a racing reference search while you give your thoughts on this race. I mean, what is it? We have Cold Custard somehow or another finishing the top 10. So hell does freeze over.
First top 10 of the season, by the way.
Yeah, hell does freeze over once in a while, since Cold Custard actually got a top 10. And then Chris Buescher was on fire. He was 2 laps down. And because of all the argy-bargy that was going on, as Calvin Fish would say, Chris Buescher finished 10th. So I guess we'll go there. I mean, Tyler Reddick dominated this race. He had the fastest car. It looked just like Road America. It had all the fields of Road America, except he was able to kind of, get away. He didn't have as good of a starting spot at Road America. He had to work for it. And then he beat Clyde. The Hendrick cars were not as good at this race for whatever reason. We'll get into some of that later, but Clyde spun out, but Reddick dominated. Briscoe had a good car early. He did stay out to get that stage point, or the playoff point, and the stage win in regards to their points, trying to go and solidify their point situation. But Austin Cindric, it kind of reminds, like, the 3 best cars at Road America were the 8 car, the 2 car, and the 9 car. In this case, it was the 8 car, the 20, and the 12, but the 2 car was there. And in the end, the 2 car took the same strategy as Tyler Reddick. And they finished 1st and 2nd in this race. Best finish for Austin Cindric since he won the Daytona 500. Much needed. He is going to win the Rookie of the Year, but the fact of the matter is his playoff position, just like his buddy Chase Briscoe's, is kind of perilous at the moment based on their points. But got to give credit to Tyler Reddick and that 8 crew, considering all the turmoil going on there, RC, the drama with him leaving. And for them to put a car out there that was that much better than everyone else hasn't really happened that much so far this year, Joe, in regards to just one car being that damn good that really nobody could touch him.
Yeah, and I think this is something that's really going to give that 8 team a lot of positive momentum. It was, you naturally wonder, right, when somebody announces that they now have a contract for the following year. And even worse for Reddick, his is 2 years out, right? So the effect is still immediate on the team, but that drags out so much longer because you're not announcing something for half a season later. You're saying a season and a half later. So I think there was a lot of worry in the garage. I know I had made a tweet about it. Some other people I've talked to, they were worried about the 8 team after the announcement that, hey, I'm going to go drive in 2024 for 2311. And then on top of that, to have Childress kind of out of the loop and not really know and have them make the statement that they made, to me, this was one of the most clear examples of how an announcement really disrupts the team flow. And it got them down for about a week, it seemed. they went up and put out a second place finish at Pocono, second place after the disqualifications at Pocono, and now they've won, right? And like you said, their car for the most part, nobody really touched. Blaney was good. I don't think he would have passed the 8 on track had it, they were on a different strategy most of the race. Bell was good as well, but I think he might have been the only car that passed Reddick, at least up in the top 5, under a long green flag run. At the end there, I thought Elliott might have had something for him, but just got the short end of the stick there. All good things come to an end for Elliott with that 1-2 run finally coming and closing, finished 16th after spinning. But yeah, to me, this is a great thing for that 8 team, because what's going to happen now is they're going to understand, okay, yes, we have a year and a half, and yes, we know this driver is leaving, but we also know now we're capable of kicking everybody's ass, right? And that is so powerful. And if they can keep that mentality, and if they can keep building these really great cars, I think we're going to see a lot out of Tyler Reddick in this next year and a half, even though we know he's leaving and he's going to go and be in a 2311 Toyota. This is going to be a dangerous team, because to them, I think the way they might see it is, well, what do we have to lose, right? Right now, they're locked into the playoffs. They have nothing to lose until we get to the playoffs. And at that point, if this little bit of momentum, if this stretch of good runs that they're on bubbles and it boils, they could have something really good headed in the playoffs. And that's going to be scary, right? They're not going to get any of the bonus points for the end of the regular season. It's just not going to happen. But having those multiple wins and being part of what this year is such a small group of drivers with multiple wins, that's worth a lot. So they're going to be somebody I watch early on in the playoffs, because too, in the playoffs, there's another road course. There's the Roval that arguably last year, Reddick may have had the best car at the end of the race. Just mistakes here and there led to him losing that race. So I'll be very interested to see later down the road this year and into next year. But this single race, I think, changes their long-term outlook for the rest of Reddick's time at that organization. The racing itself, last year, I remember having very mixed feelings about the Indianapolis Road Course. I think it was just because they were breaking tradition. They were moving away from the oval, and that was that. This year, I feel like the race was very tame for the most. And now I understand stage 1, there was a lot happening, but no cautions. The leaders were able to sort of break away and run pretty decently. Stage 2, really nothing crazy happened. And then stage 3 was really calm up until, the last, 5-ish laps when we had that string of 2 or 3 cautions. So to me, this race was more so about the tire strategy. I didn't know if I was more impressed or upset at how well the tires held on. I liked it because I think having tires that hold on so well, it opens up the floodgate for strategies, right? Because people were still changing tires. It wasn't like people were saying, oh, well, there's no tire wear, we're not going to change tires, right? Because people were still, I think, fearful of the unknown of not having raced this tire at this track. And seeing as how some people had issues early in the day, I think they maybe felt like it might be the safe option, the conservative option to go forth to change the tires. But those who were bold, like Ryan Blaney, it rewarded them with stage points. And, for Blaney, that puts a little more padding between himself and Martin Truex Jr., who is, they're third and fourth in points and fighting for possibly the last spot in the playoffs, which is just still absurd to me. And so, it was still a very interesting race strategy-wise. The end was a total cluster, right? No ifs, ands, or buts. It was all over Twitter for at least the rest of Sunday. I was in the middle of writing an article, and I was constantly Twitter notification, about penalties and this is and that. And that's the one thing I think you and we had talked a little bit about after the race were the penalties, right? Why did Ross Chastain get penalized? Why didn't Bubba get penalized? Because Bubba ran through the grass on that last run. Austin Dillon. So basically, and I don't know if before we talk about the penalties, you want to throw anything in.
Yeah, I think everything you were talking about was right on. I think the tires, when you consider Goodyear's history over time, especially at this racetrack, to make a tire that was so durable that it basically didn't fall off, is something. It kind of gives me hope if they were to go back to doing the 400, that there might be a chance, because of course they're putting a penetrant on the track, somewhat of a sealer, some sort of sealer type thing. Roger Penske's doing for the oval, so you see the obvious difference of the color on the oval section relative to the road course, which has not been paved ever since they made it. I think since 2000.
Yeah, I don't know how far back that goes. I think that's right.
I think when they originally made it for Formula One. So I don't think it's ever been repaved. They've done, of course, configuration changes, added that, the little S chicane, which is what the circuit is now relative to what it was when Formula One raced there. I mean, the racing, once it got to the end, you knew they were just going to start running over each other. It's kind of a part and parcel for what this sport has become. It's kind of the WWE aspect of it. A lot of people were not happy. Kevin Harvick wanted to kill about 15 people after that race. Ryan Blaney and Daniel Suarez were not happy. Daniel Suarez was going after his fellow Coca-Cola driver, Dale Jarrett, Hall of Famer Dale Jarrett.
He wasn't even going after another driver. He was going after the broadcast team.
So the amigos and everybody were going after their fellow Coca-Cola driver and legend, a two-time winner at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And just to add, before we go past that, there was an amazing picture with a bunch of every living driver that has either won the Indianapolis 500, the Brickyard 400, or in AJ Allmendinger's case, he won the road course last year. He was the one. Now, my thing is, at that point, why don't you just let the Xfinity guys get in on that too, and then Chase Briscoe could get that picture? I'm biased. I wanted that. And then Cindric could have been there too. That would have been cool. And then you have the Indy Road Course guys. I mean, some of those guys that have won the Indy 500, of course, would have been in that as well. But, I guess, when you consider how great that group was, but Tony wasn't in it. I don't know. Tony wasn't there, I don't think, for that particular picture.
Yeah, I didn't recall seeing Tony.
But he got there on Sunday. Yeah, which is weird. You would have thought if they were going to arrange that, they would actually arrange it so that they could get as many, if not. The Ricky Rudd came out of nowhere. I mean, he's been hiding in the mountains of Virginia since he retired a decade ago, and that's the first or second time I think I've ever. The first time was when he was on the DJD, and the second time is that a couple days ago when he went and did that picture. I'm like, holy crap, that's Ricky Rudd. It's like how Lake Speed's come out of hibernation for Stapleton 42 and Lake Speed's son, who talks just like him, which is kind of crazy, but he's like a PR guy, but he's much taller, but but Lake Speed's whole shop is still there. It's a whole other thing, but I'm sorry to digress on that. I mean, it was an interesting day. I mean, it was typical road course racing, especially now that we have the stupid stages. It's not an organic road course race anymore. You saw the differences in strategy, as you said. Briscoe was going for points, overall points. You had Cindric thinking about trying to win, which is perfectly fine. As it stands, to go and look at that. I mean, I brought up Daniel Suarez there, Cindric and Briscoe. They're all separated by 15 or 20 points. Suarez is only 5 points ahead of Austin Cindric, and Chase Briscoe, if there are more than 16 winners, essentially if there are more than 16 winners, then Kurt Busch would be knocked out because he's missed, of course, 2 races. Hopefully he'll be back this week. Ty Gibbs did fill in for him on Sunday and finished 17th.
17th.
So he finished. So he's had 2 top 20 finishes in his Cup career so far, which there's a lot of rookies that would wish they could have 2 top 20 finishes to start their career on 2 totally different type of racetracks too. But yeah. So right now, Kurt would be the first, but Briscoe's right there in second. My thing is like, I guess I'll ask you this because just as a side, they've done this the last two road course races, the 14 car. Do they understand the points differently than most of us do, where they're emphasizing getting a playoff point to where they think the playoff points will help them in regards to being protected or advancement, or is it just some other John Klossmeyer has some other worldview that we don't have? Because their cars have been good early in the race and they've had good short run cars. They had a better long run car actually on Sunday in the first stage, but then once they lost track position, they went back to being what they are.
Yeah, so I think probably what they're thinking over at the 14 team, and even I noticed Austin Cindric, I think he did this at Road America. Because I don't think he pulled this strategy this time. But to me, this indicates one of two things, in particular to this weekend. They thought either, man, we need to really try to put as many points between us and Kurt, right? Because if we get to that point where there's 17 winners, right, we have now 4 more races, and you're telling me 3 of those 4 races, you're going to need to have new winners to get to 17. Personally, yeah. I just don't see it happening. With almost half the field having won a race this season, I just don't see it happening. I think what they're thinking is, you know what, we're a little short on playoff points. Maybe they feel like they don't necessarily have a race-winning car, especially after, watching Reddick dominate that first stage and just absolutely pull away from everybody. I think that's their call. I think it's not a staged call before the race. Hey, guys, by the way, we're just going to stay out, right? I think that's an in-the-moment call. You say, you know what, Chase, do you feel like your car is good? And if he says, I don't feel like it's going to be good enough to win, then I think you stay out. You grab your playoff points. It's going to help you once you advance into the playoffs. And I'll be honest, I think all the guys we see who have won a race, I think they'll be in the playoffs. And I think really that's their call more than anything, is grab the playoff point. But also in the instance of the last 2 weeks, you have the driver who's the next closest to you, to where if you were going to be bumped, it would be him now. Just take the guaranteed points, put those points between you and him, because if you crash out in stage 3, and you didn't get any points in the first 2 stages, well, guess what? Your strategy went to waste anyway.
Yeah, that's a good call on that. I was just curious because I was thinking that they're going and banking on the stage points because there's some within the levels of tiebreakers and things that would go. And so, yeah, because I'm like, I get it in that sense, but then I'm also thinking if you're willing to take that shot, you also have some semblance of belief that you can possibly get back up to like run top 15, which his car never really got back up there after that. He was in a position late, and then he was involved in one of those one of the wrecks happened there. We can get into, for Bubba Wallace, he's in the top 20 in points, which is huge for him. He's only 13 points behind his car owner, and he's only, albeit, of course, Kurt Busch has missed a couple of races, but he's 27 points behind his teammate. And before we move on, I guess we're going to tracks now, Michigan and Daytona, that are places that are possibilities for him. We're getting into this point situation. You brought it up where 4 races to go, likelihood of seeing 3 new winners is low, but it's not impossible. Blaney has won at Michigan. Martin Truex has always been really good there.
Harvick's got a pair of wins at Michigan.
Yeah, Harvick's always been good at Michigan. But as a Martin Truex, one of his 86 home tracks is Watkins Glen, and he's won there. You got Richmond, which 2 of the, Harvick and Martin Truex have won there. And then Daytona, which of course, Harvick won the 500. That can be anybody. Harvick has won a 500 many years ago. Truex has won Xfinity race there. Blaney has been one of the best super speedway racers, more at Talladega to have the final result. He's been up front in a position to possibly win at Daytona multiple times. And then that also adds in his BFF, Bubba Wallace, who's won at Michigan in a truck, has been good there in all three series, or at least trucks and Xfinity. And he's been great at Daytona over his career. So you're just talking about those four guys. Those four guys are just right now in terms of the current point standings. Not to discount the likes of, like right now, Blaney is second in overall points. He's 4 points ahead of Ross Chastain, but right now he's in a battle, second and fourth in points, as you said, which is crazy. That would be something if the guy who's second in overall points misses the playoffs. That'd be ridiculous. But then you have Harvick, who's 10th in points, but is in real trouble. Eric Almirola, who, for what they're saying in multiple areas, might be coming back, which is interesting to me. Mainly it's, I guess, Smithfield pushing that, because if I was Smithfield, I'd be like, go and sponsor Ryan Preece. What the hell are you losing? You can pay him less. And they can go and start hedging other sponsors because he has other entities.
Yeah.
And you're going to get the same kind of results. And you have the better likelihood of his potential being shown in that car. Hopefully they would then start switching some crew chiefs around, because I've been yelling for a crew chief change on the 14 car from the beginning. And last weekend isn't any different. They can make a car that's good for 1 lap and good for about 5 laps, but the problem is races are 400, 500, or 300 laps. So if you're good for 5 laps, it doesn't count for shit unless it's a green, white, checkered. And then you're cold custard at Kentucky. So, and that was the last time he was relevant. We get into this right here. Austin Dillon fell back outside of the top 20, even though he had a fast race car. Of course, he got penalized. So we'll take it two ways. I'll preface it in two ways. We mentioned all those guys that can possibly win, that don't have wins yet, that are inside of the top 20 in points. You got people like Chris Buescher, who's been really good on road courses and got that top 10 after being on fire. Haley is a super speedway specialist. Richard has won all his races on super speedways and actually had a decent car. He has run pretty well at times, but it's not consistent. You have McDowell, who lost all those points, but is having a career year. Now, how is he going to do it without Caitlin Vincey's husband, Blake Harris, on the pit box for the next 4 weeks? I'm not so sure. Maybe their son, who they had pictures of on the Instagram with a ratcheting wrench. So maybe he'll be on the pit box. I think that would be, considering Michael McDowell's NASCAR career, he probably would do better if a baby was his crew chief. Considering MW55 gave him a car that was so loose he almost killed himself at Texas. Brad Keselowski is also hanging out there, who's a freaking Cup Series champion and has had a brutal year. So there's that aspect of it, about the winners and the possibility of those winners looking at these next 4 races. And then we'll talk about the penalties that were decided or called on Sunday with Ross Chastain and Austin Dillon taking the shortcut, the runoff off turn 1, and basically airmailing it through, which, I'll put my part in, but you can go with those things, Joe, and I'll go and riff off of that.
All right. So let's start off with the points. And this might be a little bit of a long-winded answer, but this was actually a really interesting conversation that my dad and I were having following the Indianapolis race. So this is truly, at least since we've had the advent of the 16-car elimination-style playoffs, the win-and-you're-in format, this is truly one of the most interesting situations, because usually you have a driver or 2 drivers or 3 drivers who they're all around the cutoff, right? Because they either haven't won but they're in on points, or because they haven't won and they don't quite have the points, but they're close enough to where they can kind of pounce, right? If one thing goes wrong here and something goes right here, it makes a world of difference. It's not like that this year. This year is almost so straightforward in some ways that people are going to have to find a way to get really creative the next 4 weeks. Because as it sits, if you are Justin Haley in 22nd in points or lower, you can't point your way in the playoffs. It is not mathematically possible. That leaves 5 drivers who mathematically it is possible, that being Austin Dillon in 21st, Bubba Wallace in 20th, Eric Jones is 17th. He can point his way in. Eric Almirola in 16th, and Kevin Harvick in 10th. And even though math says, yes, there is a possible scenario that they can point their way in, Harvick is the closest driver to being able to point his way in, and he's 96 points back. You telling me Harvick is going to have to net 24 points on average a race over Martin Truex Jr. to make it into the playoffs? It's not happening. It's not realistic. So if there are any teams who think they can point their way in, which I don't think there are, but if somebody's got a sliver of hope, I'm about to crush it right now. Wake up. You have to win to get into the playoffs, and that's it. That's it, point blank. So that is going to make these next 4 weeks very interesting, because I feel like when we're at Michigan, we see some fuel strategy, but we never see tire strategy. When we're at, the road courses are obviously a lot more strategic, and if you come in at a certain time. And I can't help but wonder, because we haven't seen this really since stages, right? It's either you stay out and you get the stage points, or you come in and pit and you just pit twice after the 2 stages. If I recall correctly, there was a different length of the race that drivers would go prior to the advent of stage racing, to where they could make it on 2 stops at Watkins Glen, basically cutting the entire race into third. Now, obviously, if you go on that strategy, you are going to sacrifice all your stage points, right? But I'm going to be honest, what does it matter at this point if you're not in the playoffs? Why are you concerned about a playoff point? You're not. It's not going to be useful. So I think the drivers who are really seriously like, you know what, I got a good car, they're going to have to make some strategy calls, not just at Watkins Glen, at every race from here on out. Because without a win, you're not in. That's it, right? And it's just, that's the mentality people need to have. And it's going to make it really interesting to see how creative with fuel, how creative with tires, how creative with every aspect of the race that teams and drivers can get, right? Michigan, I don't really remember too well what the fuel runs used to be. If Phil, I think you just said it's
it was
used to be about 50
with the 22-gallon cells back in the heyday. I remember, I'm just hearing Benny and Ned talking about Strat and certain drivers trying to get to 50 laps, and they would do 50, 100, 150. So doing 3 stops, they make it in 3 stops. In this day and age, I forget how many gallons the fuel cell is.
I think typically it's about 40. I think 46 is the longest in my memory, at least. Someone stretched it.
So in the end, you're talking about early 40 laps. So right now you're talking about 4 stops. They're trying, you might want to go and get mega fuel save, try not to lose a lap, considering the new aero. The fact is they're running the regular package, which is a low spoiler. It's not the big ass spoiler, as your boy Dale Jr. would say.
Oh, what's interesting too is that now I'm really curious to see how the turbulent air that rolls underneath the car, it's going to bring the cars, it's going to give them a little bit better closing rate. It's going to give them a little bit better suck. I want to say that, there may be possibility to where you can utilize the draft a little more than previous years and save some gas. I don't know if it's really going to correspond to more passing gas. Depends on how people are feeling, I guess. But needs to worry about points is Kevin Harvick, and he only needs to worry about points if Ryan Blaney and Martin Truex Jr. crash out of the race. That's the only instance anybody needs to worry about points. If Blaney and Truex are still racing, Harvick needs to win. That's it. Done. Point blank. So he's aggressive. in strategy, and in on track. Because let me tell you, if Harvick opportunity to punt someone out of the way, I don't care who it is, he's going to take it because he hasn't won in 2 years and he wants that playoff berth. And that's not just Harvick, that's anybody. If Bubba's in that situation, I fully expect him to do the same thing. And you know what? I don't harbor any resentment, as I'm sure the driver might, but as a fan, you can't harbor any resentment because it's what you got to do at this point. So I'm really expecting, in a number of ways, an aggressive last 4 races. I think Daytona is going to be particularly interesting because at the rate we're going, Chase Elliott might lock up season championship, lose any more points to second place. He will. So that then will certain things. I think Chase is really at this point maybe the only driver whose points, if he crashes out 2 weeks and Blaney goes and has 2 good weeks, then it's a different story. But points, it's super straightforward on paper. Win, that's it, right? Only option. But what that does in the races is going to cause a lot of chaos and possibly some G's we don't see often or that are brand new. We don't see it all. Moving a little bit back towards the penalty, which was the other question you had posed. So there were 2 penalties, 3 questionable calls, I think, that fans pointed out. The first one, we'll start with that. Ross Chastain takes the access road on the final restart, blends back in at the proper spot on the racetrack, and blends in next to Tyler Reddick, ends up taking the lead. Reddick and Ross crossed the line second. Austin Dillon he was much farther back in the pack. But he was a lap down at that point. I'm not sure exactly he was in. And then you had Bubba Wallace. So again, same restart. All this happened on that last restart. You have Bubba Wallace, who did not go on the access road. Now, Bubba, he went into the turn and there was contact made with 1 or 2 other cars, and he cut the grass very similar to how Briscoe cut the grass last year after making contact with Hamlin. And then he rejoined the track, and fans pointed at that. So just a quick explanation for anybody who hasn't found one yet. So Ross and Austin Dillon, the deal with that is that NASCAR sees that as almost an elective. Take that, right? When Ross decided, right, I'm going to the access road, his mentality was, well, I can see that they're 3 wide next to me and I feel like I might wreck. So I'm going to take the access road and it'll save me. Austin Dillon, now we never really got a clear-cut answer from him, but I imagine that was the same mentality. With them, in their situations, basically, NASCAR has deemed what they did was, in some form, was elective. You did not have to go down the access road. An access road, for the most part, should only really be used in NASCAR if you need to, first off, if you blow the corner completely and you just mess up, right? You go down the access road, that's seen as your penalty. The second instance would be if you're having some type of an issue and you need to pull off the racetrack more immediately to essentially just being a responsible driver. And then the third instance would just be that, I forgot what it was, I'm sorry. I've had a lot of conversations about this week, which makes me feel very irresponsible. But
it's all good.
Basically, what I'm getting at is there are very limited occasions that you should be going down that access road. Very, very limited. And outside of those few things, NASCAR does not want the access road. There are, safety trucks sometimes by the access roads. There are, barriers around the access road. There's a lot of other things happening there you don't necessarily see. So NASCAR doesn't really want you on there. The way I've been explaining it to people, think about the double yellow line at Talladega, right? If you get forced, right, a car physically comes down and makes contact with you and you are pushed below the double yellow line and you advance, there's no problem, right? Because you were pushed down there. It wasn't your intention. But if you don't get touched, right? If you are not forced, if you basically just say, I need to pass this guy, even if he's really slow, right? And you go below that yellow line and that's on you, you get penalized, right? And that's it. So I've been comparing this a little bit to that situation because yes, Ross, I think what he did was truly the right move, but at the same time, it was the right move because they did wreck. Because by the time Ross made that move, they had not started crashing. With Austin Dillon, I think really more than anything, yes, he was avoiding a crash that was happening in front of him. I think NASCAR needed to make that call for consistency purposes. It wouldn't have been fair to Ross if they had called those two differently, I don't think. And then, too, you have NASCAR Twitter would get into a whirlwind because, well, why are you inconsistent? Now,
well,
Bubba,
they're consistently inconsistent.
That's
they
true.
have selective enforcement, which is what I always say, which fits what you're just saying.
Now, with Bubba, it's different. He elected to stay on the track. He did not go down that access road. He intentionally stayed on the track. There was contact made. And if you watch the replay, if you watch one of the overhead replays from the helicopter, you can tell, yes, he was attempting to make that first turn. He got bonked, and that sent him in the direction that he continued to drive. To the outside of him, or I guess not the outside on the road course, to the right side of the car, they were wrecking. So he avoided a wreck. First off, he was forced into the grass, and then he continued to drive in the grass because there was a crash happening alongside of him. So NASCAR deemed not to penalize him. I think that was the right call. I really do. There's no sense in penalizing somebody because they drove through the grass after they were forced there, nonetheless, to avoid crashing, right? To me, that's fair game.
Well, that was what Chase Briscoe did too, but he made it way more obvious because he took half the angle, he took half the lawn out instead of going and trying to aim and stay closer towards the track.
I think, and again, I think this shows a little bit of inconsistency. If you remove those wrecking cars, there's really no reason for Bubba to take the rest of the grass. He's got to try and get back onto the track. And I think that was the difference between Briscoe last year and Bubba this year. Yes, both made contact. Yes, both were kind of shoved off the racing surface. But you didn't have all the turn two crashing that, kind of was like, okay, well, Bubba's got to avoid it somehow. Briscoe had the opportunity. He didn't take it. At least that's what NASCAR sees. So I think they made the right call on Bubba. And truthfully, too, I think they made the right calls on Ross and Austin Dillon. I understand why they went there on the access road. I certainly don't fault because I also kind of think they made the right call, right? Like, I don't think what they did was necessarily wrong for their race, but I also don't think NASCAR was unfairly enforcing their rules, right? It had been made clear to all the drivers pre-race that, hey, if you do this for this reason, you're toast, right? That's that. Now, the one thing I will say, and this was something you and I had discussed about it, was that I think if the two drivers, if Ross and Austin Dillon, if they had done more of a stop and go, right, voluntarily, I think maybe NASCAR would have reconsidered. Because if you're going there intentionally, it's a bad look. If you're going to give NASCAR something back, I think maybe they would have let it slide. Because, then with Ross in particular, you had him jump 5 or 6 positions on that access road to then pass the leader. And that could have affected the whole outcome of the entire race. So I think that's the big thing. I'm curious. I hope next year they kind of go back and they make the rules a little bit more, less subjective, I should say, a little more clear cut. And I hope maybe there is an inclusion somewhere of, hey, if you stop and go, you're good. That's what we do at the Roval, right? You blow the chicane on the back stretch or you blow the chicane on the front stretch. You stop, you go, you're good. Bye-bye. That's it. Done. Your penalty served. So it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward at the road courses. Watkins Glen, we don't really have a lot of those areas. And the Roval has been pretty straightforward with if you miss a certain area or not. So, but definitely interesting. And I don't know, some penalties the past few weeks, huh?
Oh, well, there's a lot of people poking with all the inspection penalties and stuff that happened there. Essentially buried the 43, 42, and the 34 and their chances. Even though I think Eric Jones has a sneaky chance. And I mean, the 34, I'm not so sure now that Blake Harris is not going to be on the box, but he'll be remote. So maybe they still have an outside chance. And of course, McDowell road course driver previous in his career, and of course a winner of the Daytona 500 as I throw up in my mouth. Those two guys might have a chance. We talked about those other people that are in the points. I think the one piece is they're going to have to change that access road. Essentially, put cones like they do at Portland back in the heyday of Indy cars. You would have to go through a little loop, whether it's cones or tires. The Italian Grand Prix at Monza, if you don't make the first chicane, they have turtle kind of curve things on the outside, or you go and run through a little maze. Excuse me. They have that at Coda too. They have that at a lot of the tier grade 1 type road courses. Well, you have that runoff at Indy. You have to go and do that same snake. So if you do that and then you drive through the runoff, you're going to end up and you gas it up. In the case of Ross Chastain, he would have been fine. The fact that he ended up second, I don't know where he was at the start at that restart.
It was like 6th or 7th or something. He was
up there. Okay. All right. I mean, when it comes to Austin Dillon, he was kind of out of it, but him taking the access road was sort of avoidance, but he was a lap down, but he went through it the same way. If you and that's what we talked about offline, that if you go and run that properly, meaning you just go and you kind of go at like pit road speed or something, like there has to be some sort of thing that would do that. So you put the cones, make them go through a maze, and then you want to gas it up, you're going to end up blending back where you need to be. And Chastain just gave up 20 points. I mean, it's not like he's going to win the regular season title. I get that. But we look at the regular season points championship, and they give points after the regular season champion gets 15 playoff points, and that played a role in the Truck Series situation for Chandler Smith. It was like how his performance at Pocono last week was an epic performance, because he goes and wins those stages, basically maxes out his points, and then moves up to second and gains more playoff points, and he's right there with Zane Smith. And after all that Zane Smith's done all year, it doesn't look like he had done a whole lot. Like that's where it kind of looks like when you're 100 points behind the guy that's going to be the regular season champion, you want those points. In the case of Ryan Blaney, he's going to need them as long as he makes it in that sense. I mean, NASCAR and penalties, they'll throw the book at the smaller team. They won't throw the book at Hendrick or Gibbs or any of that. That's just been the thing forever. Or they will they'll definitely throw it at Gibbs when it suits them. They've done that with over the last few years, and then they send them to the back and they come to the front and they win anyway. But what they did at Pocono was a little bit more obvious or egregious per NASCAR inspection. My thing is, if I have a hard time believing, it's what I said last week on the show, if you're going to tell me that the rest of them Toyotas weren't the same, then you think I was born yesterday. Though Josh had a great point in regards to the situation that some of the other guys are in, like, Truex, like Bubba, where they need every point they can get. Why would they want to cheat those cars up or whatever the hell you want to call it? It wouldn't. Who the hell cares if they run it on Ty Gibbs' car because he's a rookie? Nobody's going to look at that car. But then they do random inspections of random cars too. So, but they're not going to tear the whole entire thing down. But I guess that's something we'll see. Michigan, I think, is going to be interesting. Inspection this weekend is going to be interesting for sure. It's more similar to Pocono in that way. These next, what is it? You got this weekend's Michigan. You got Richmond,
Glen, Daytona.
And Glen and Daytona to run this thing out. So Richmond is going back to a track they went to earlier in the year and it was a bore fest, but there was good pit. There was an interesting pit strategy situation, which is what made the race somewhat interesting. This car has not really done well per se on the flatter tracks. So we'll see what happens with that, if it'll just be strictly like Formula One in qualifying. But Michigan, I think, is going to be a good one for sure. It'll be like a harkening back to the old days, I think, with a little more pack style, not with the bullshit with the BAS, but like actual driving. And there might be some fuel strategy, even with the stupid stages. But we will see for sure. Let's get into the XFinity Series at the Road America. Next, okay, all right, that's good. Don't have to worry about that. XFinity Series was also at Indianapolis. Saw AJ Allmendinger get the win in the Pennzoil 150. And then in regards to the driver points, we'll go through the standings here, or results. AJ Allmendinger gets the win. Alex Bowman finishes second. Justin Allgaier third. Ross Chastain for Mario Goslin finished fourth. Chase Briscoe for Bobby Dotter, SS Greenlight, with no third gear, finished fifth. Riley Herbst sixth. Sam Mayer seventh. Ty Gibbs eighth. Austin Hill ninth. Noah Gagson 10th. Won the first stage. Josh Berry won the second stage. Good playoff point day for him, and stage point day. He got stage points in both stages, one of the only guys. He basically mirrored Briscoe's, or kind of reversed Briscoe's deal from Sunday. Won stage 2 instead of stage 1, finished 7th in stage. And they finished first and 7th in stages, and they had not much to show for it after that. In regards to the points, Allmendinger is 17 points ahead of Justin Allgaier, 30 points ahead of Ty Gibbs, and that's really the battle for the regular season championship. Those three guys are going to be the guys that are going to get those bonus points. How far do the bonus points go, Joe, in regards to the playoff, those bonus playoff points?
The end of the regular season? Also
Yeah.
top 10. Yeah, so first place will get 15, and then second place will get 10, and then from there, third is 8, 7. Third is 8, fourth is 7th, and so forth until you get to 10th in the standings. Will get 1 point.
And that's across all three seasons?
All three.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Yeah, so, I mean, for Allmendinger, he's giving up a few playoff points. It's his third win of the year, so he's right on par, essentially, with Allgaier and Gibbs in that sense. Allgaier, of course, has won 6 stages. His teammates are up there. Those are the junior motorsports guys, those 3 guys. And if you add Sam Mayer to that mix, of course, 22 stage wins so far this year amongst the junior motorsports team. So domination in that sense. Ty Gibbs doesn't really win stages, but he wins races. So it counts in that sense. You're up there when it counts. In regards to this race, it was Allmendinger dominated. There was a lot of Cup guys in it. That's kind of what I watched because Briscoe was in it. I was kind of hoping that he would add a car that like Cole Custer out of California, and he really didn't. He probably had a 5th place, 3rd to 8th place car, which is essentially where he finished, and he didn't even have 3rd gear. And Bowman looked good. He struggled on road courses here recently. Looked good. That 17 car was pretty fast, but it wasn't fast enough to be around AJ Allmendinger. Junior Motorsports gets 3 of their cars in the top 10. If you want to really get out there, they have 4, because the Hendrick car is essentially a junior motorsports car too. Junior said it. But yeah, Allmendinger, big win for him, Joe, on Saturday to give himself some momentum. I mean, I think Daytona is an opportunity and Watkins Glen are opportunity races for him, but I don't think Michigan or Richmond are essentially tracks that are going to suit Kaulig Racing at the moment on the Xfinity side.
Yeah, and I feel like he kind of needed this because all summer we've been talking about really two teams. Has been JRM and has been Ty Gibbs. Not even all of Joe Gibbs Racing, just Ty Gibbs. And he was still running consistently, but he was also consistently giving up points to Gibbs or to JRM, particularly to Allgaier, who's closed the gap a ton. I believe at one point he was like 54-60, basically a full race worth back. So, this is a much more interesting points battle for the sake of actual points, not the whole win and you're in type deal, because in this series right now, it looks like you got 3 different drivers who could go and win that regular season championship. And all it's going to take is a slip from one of them to kind of have that taken away from him. Dinger in particular, he definitely needed some momentum going forward. Again, like he's been there. It's not that he's been doing poorly. He just hasn't been doing nearly as well as the 4 JRM drivers put up and come out consistently, and Ty Gibbs puts up and comes out consistently. So much needed for him. Allgaier, though, even still finished strong. A little bit off for Ty Gibbs with that 8th place. He's been really good at the road courses. And it's not that 8th place is a bad run, but I mean, for him, I think that might be his worst road course finish this year, in fact. So, which says a lot, right? That's telling. And moving forward too with the Xfinity Series, Michigan, like you said, I don't really know that that's going to fall into Kaulig's hands. I definitely don't think Richmond is. I know last year Allmendinger, I believe, just came shy of winning a stage there, but they really, it's not a good track for them. Xfinity does not revisit Richmond. They have that week off. Watkins Glen, you got Daytona. What's interesting with the Xfinity Series, they actually have more races before their playoffs. They're the last group to start their playoffs. They'll still have Darlington, Kansas, and Bristol. So they've got quite a ways left. So there's a lot that can happen. But nonetheless, that 16 team, they definitely needed momentum. They got some here. Daytona will provide them an opportunity. And I think Bristol even. Allmendinger was really good there last year, ended up winning the race in that finish with Austin Cindric where they both got junked coming to the start-finish line. So, and two, when I look at these tracks, these are pretty much all tracks where I can see Allgaier and Ty Gibbs doing really well. And the fact that I can't say, I really think that Michigan's going to be a good track for Allmendinger. And I don't know that Darlington, is going to be a real great track for him. Darlington, where we know that Allgaier's won the last 2 spring races there. So I think there's definitely an element of pressure on Allmendinger. The benefit of him is that he was in the same position last year. Except last year, he was more offensive. He was behind Cindric for a lot of the regular season, if I remember correctly. I don't think Cindric was playing catch up to him. So it'll be interesting. This is going to be a points for points battle because there's nothing really that a win, aside from the fact that it's going to give you more playoff points, is going to do for you. If you're one of those 3 drivers, it's not going to solidify you the regular season championship. It's just not. So much more interesting there. And to me, really, those are 3 teams I expect to be in the Final Four this year, just based off of the way they run. I know I just kind of bashed Allmendinger, but his consistency is his strong suit, and we saw consistency get Hemrick to the Final Four last year. He pulled off the 1 win, and that was it. That's all you need. Berry and Noah Gragson, Gragson got that really close win with Gibbs a few weeks ago, but I feel like overall, just the 8 and the 9, they're starting to fall off of the 7. And maybe it's been over like the course of the past 2 or 3 weeks even. They've been starting to fall off of how good that 7 car has been. And then Mayer just, you'd throw him in with the rest of the JRM cars. He just hasn't been as good. I don't know if it's lack of experience or what, but he just hasn't been there where some of his teammates have. It seems like with the Xfinity Series, we have the same guys in the playoffs every year, so I'm not going to really talk about too much about that, who's out, who's in. I think the more exciting story with the Xfinity Series is that we're going to have an Xfinity regular making a Cup debut this upcoming weekend at Michigan. I'll save that for later too. But yeah, I think you're spot on. This is something that Allmendinger definitely needed. Colleague as a whole definitely needed. They haven't been having a lot of luck lately.
Yeah, it's something that we'll look at. I mean, you're going in the middle of September before, as you said, before the playoffs start. So a long time to go for them. But I think we kind of know a lot of the players that we're going to look at in regards to this championship, not just for this weekend, but in general. I think the points are speaking to what we're going to see come Phoenix. The Owners' Points Championship will be a little different for sure, just like in the trucks. Essentially, there's 12 drivers in the truck playoffs instead of 10 because there's 2 owner points teams that are competing based on their which we'll get into in just a moment here. But we'll see the same thing here in the Xfinity Series too. I mean, Sieg right now has got a 50-point lead on Sheldon Creed for the cutoff, but Sheldon Creed has started to turn things around a bit. Anthony Alfredo is the only other car that's within 100 points. He's He's 88, so that's 75 points behind. After that, the next 2 guys have been canceled. Thanks Orangeade, or in the case of Brett Moffitt, it was his own self. He self-inflicted it to himself. I don't think. Yeah, Brandon Brown, I'm not so sure about, but we can kind of let both of those guys are out. So Myatt Snider is holding out hope that he can. He needed to win Portland. If he had won Portland, then he would have been all right. Jordan Anderson's actually going to run this weekend in the Xfinity Series, so that'll be interesting. Since the qualifying has actually been quite difficult in the Xfinity Series, even though the back end of the Xfinity Series is not exactly the greatest. Trying to get in on time is tough. So it'll be interesting to see if Jordan Anderson can go and make it in on time and help his regular driver in regards to the point situation. Now that essentially 2 drivers have dropped out of this playoff thing. The Truck Series started their playoffs at IRP or Lucas Oil IRP to get rid of that. The winner was Grant Enfinger. Defending series champion Ben Rhodes finished second. Regular season champion Zane Smith, who started 21st, finished third. Stu Ball finished fourth. Corey Heim, who's in one of the he's in a playoff truck because of the owner's points, finished fifth. But he's not a competitor in the actual playoffs for the actual championship. Heim, of course, has won twice this year, so he's just hedging towards his eventuality of being in a Kyle Busch Motorsports truck, whatever manufacturer that'll be next year. Tyler Ankrum finally shows up. He's shown up the last couple of weeks. I don't know what happened to him the first 12 weeks of the season, and that Tory Racing team in general, because the last couple of weeks they've been good, but for 12 weeks they were pretty shitty. Lane Riggs, gonna harken back. His father was Scott Riggs, who ran over David Green at Dover in 2003, and not the Yoo-Hoo car, the Nesquik car, when David Green was driving the Timberwolf Pontiac in 2003 at Dover, and that was one of the things that cost David Green an Busch Series championship at that point. His Xfinity now would have been his second championship. Now, of course, David Green works for NASCAR. The guy that won that Xfinity championship has gone into hiding. because his wife was involved in some questionable things. But for Lane Riggs, driving for Stuball, getting his Truck Series debut, started 23rd, finished 7th. Great run by him. Best run I think that 62 truck has had all year. No offense to Todd Bodine, the Onion. He had a top 10 there in his races. It was Snoroma, I think he had a top 10, and then he had a couple decent runs. Then Haley Deegan ran him over at Pocono because she was doing her makeup. She was doing a TikTok hit or whatever the hell she was doing. Or swallowing cock. Ty Majeski 8th, Matt Crafton 9th, and John Hunter Nemechek, as I mentioned earlier, who hit everything but the lottery, finished 10th. Now, other people that stood out during this race, of course, Chandler Smith, the guy who came in to this race with a lot of momentum, won the ARCA race prior to the truck race on Friday night. So he was in a good place, good state of mind. Didn't get the finish he wanted. 18th. Carson Hocevar, still nursing that injury. Finished 21st, so giving up some points. And then Taylor Gray, who is showing some talent and potential, the likely East Series champion in the ARC East. But I guess we start with Grant Enfinger, Joe. Guy's a veteran. He's always been a grinder. He's had to struggle his whole entire career. But to get that win at IRP was huge for that team, that organization, because they needed it. They haven't been there all year. That's and now let's also add Jeff Hensley, who's been going back and forth. Jeff Hensley had been at GMS, went to Thor Sport, was with Crafton, went back to GMS in only, I think, his second race back or third race back with GMS. Him and Grant Enfinger get back into victory lane. Jeff Hensley, championship-winning crew chief, going all the way back to 1990 with Chuck Bound and the 63 Nescafe Pontiac. The guy knows his shit. And Grant Enfinger knows his shit too. They're sneaky. And GMS, I guess they're going to start. I think they're probably going to take some of their energy off of one of their cup cars and put it into that 23 truck and try to hedge for the 43 car and cup. And then after that, they'll tell Jack Wood, you want to wreck every week, you go ahead, because you're going to do that anyway because you suck. But in Grant Enfinger, they have a chance to possibly backdoor Truck Series championship on the Smiths. And then we'll get into some other issues that took place on Friday night.
Yeah, so first off, I wanted to say that seeing Grant Enfinger win made me really happy. Not because I particularly root for Grant Enfinger, but he's had a really rough last year or so, right? I mean, he was such a dominant force back in 2019, 2020. I think won Daytona maybe back-to-back years, or at least got close to winning Daytona back-to-back years. There was one year he won the regular season championship, didn't quite correlate into a championship through the playoff system, but he's a really good driver, and it really boggled my mind hearing I think it was at the start of 2021 that he was only going to run half of the season with Thor Sport in the 98 truck where he had been, and the rest of his season was free because they were going to swap the seat with Christian Eckes, who really, to me, at that point, hadn't proven anything that he should be in that seat. And that opinion has since changed. But, I thought that was a really big blow to Grant Enfinger. And, I started to see, I was glad he was able to find a ride. He was driving in that 9 truck for a few races. And then I believe he had hopped over and run starting maybe at the end of last season, maybe early this season. It was hard. It's hard for me to follow trucks as much, but just because of my personal schedule. But
yeah, he'd been in the 25 truck for a little bit too, actually.
Yeah,
the Rackley truck.
Yeah, so it was good to see him get rides, but you knew they weren't rides that were really doing so great. And after seeing the way GMS performed last year, I was a little bit let down with Sheldon Creed. I thought he was going to go back to back. And as well as then hearing, okay, well, we're going to expand and we're going to go in a cup. I didn't think even that Enfinger was going to make it this far. Truthfully, because I thought after 2021, he just might not have a ride. But his sponsor, who has been with him for a number of years, way back to the Thor Sport days when he was winning Daytona, they decided, hey, we're gonna come on in, we're gonna help you out, and they've been there, but they haven't been there, if you know what I mean. Like, they haven't been there at the front of the race to win, but they've been there hanging around the back of the top 10 where they still can be in a position to make the playoffs. And they made the playoffs, and this to me is an upset win. Not because, and it's the first win that Enfinger's gotten since, I think, 2020, maybe 2019. It's not that. It's that this team, GMS as a whole, has not really been there since Creed won the championship. Yeah, they've won races since, but they haven't been a championship caliber team. And even still, I don't know that they're a championship caliber team, even after they win. But what this win does do is it gives them safety into the next round. And with 2 more races in this round, that gives them 2 opportunities to be as aggressive as they want, to go out to win stages, collect those playoff points that way. Or if they want to try and win the race, if they feel like they're going to have a truck good enough to do that, to then go and collect 5 more points by winning a stage, or by winning a race. So there's an opportunity for them that's ahead. And that's the benefit of winning early in a round, is you can kind of throw strategy out the window and collect to the points and just focus on the playoff points, because you carry them through into the next round. So I'll be very interested to see what Enfinger and that 23 team decides. I was very happy just to see that. I think I was just happy to see Indianapolis Raceway Park back on the schedule, because truthfully, my strongest memories of IRP, because they took it off the schedule when I was like 10 or 11 or 12 or something, right? And at that point, I wasn't really that invested in the truck series. At that point, it was Cup and a little bit of Xfinity. This was really like my first full race I got to watch there. My memories of IRP are on the old NASCAR games, 07, 06, 07, 08, 09, whatever. So I thought that was really cool. And I feel like it kind of goes with this theme of NASCAR as of late, whether it's NASCAR or SMI or this guy right here, kind of bringing things back, right? We've gotten IRP back from, I won't say the dead because it was still active in some capacity, but, we're getting another track back from pretty much what was extinction for it. So I think it's just cool in that sense to see, if anything. But really happy for the 23 team. I thought it was a pretty decent race overall until we got to the end. I feel like that was honestly the theme this weekend between Cup and trucks. It was a pretty decent race until we got to the last, 10% of the race.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in a minute. For me, IRP, it goes back. I was around during the Thunder, the Wednesday and Thursday night Thunder days. I can't do a Dave Despain. I wish I could. He is a legend. Dave Despain. He could go and say anything and make it sound great. The Gary and Larry Show, Fast Masters. If you really want to watch a bunch of old geezers who are legendary race car drivers destroy Jaguar XJ220s, go and YouTube that. That was the fastest car in the world back 30 years ago. 30 years ago. Real entertainment for sure. Tony Stewart made his NASCAR debut at IRP in the first ever truck race there. So that was in 1995, and that was while he was going on his way to the Triple Crown to be the first ever person to win that. Since then, J.J. Ailey's done it, and a couple other people have done it, but that he was the first. I love that racetrack. It's a great racetrack. There's been plenty of great races. There's been a lot of carnage. I remember when Tracy Leslie, of all people, won the Power Stroke 200 or whatever the hell it was called. The Kroger 200 was the Busch Series race. I think that was his first Busch Series win. He was driving the 72 Detroit gasket car. There were truck series over there. There was a lot of interesting finishes. I can't really, they were showing one of the finishes. I think Johnny Sauter was driving for Mike Curb, and he got past
2010, right?
Yeah,
was Hornaday?
No, it was Chad Chaffin driving for Bobby Hamilton. He got passed late, and that was kind of funny because Johnny Sauter losing late is just kind of funny. There's always been great racing there, and NASCAR, because of TV or whatever, moved away from their historic tracks, the tracks that were loyal to them. It's kind of the similar thing where I'm concerned about on the Northeast, where they're trying to get rid of the tracks on the Northeast, even though there was a lot of loyalty there. Indianapolis Raceway Park was there when the Busch Series started in 1982. Then they left to drive in front of 5,000 people at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They still run this road course race now, and they do it in front of maybe 25,000 people. They're banking on the doubleheader crowd, which is a good idea, but you could just as easily do that at IRP. You could have ARCA trucks and the XFinity Series at IRP, make it a 2-day show, have trucks go and qualify and do practice and everything, and have an ARCA race on Friday night, maybe do a USAC thing, USAC midgets or something, or sprints. Then you have trucks run on Saturday afternoon. You have Xfinity practice before that and qualifying, and you have an Xfinity race in the evening. To me, that's a better ticket. Make the Cup race mean something. Make the IndyCar, have the IndyCars have their day. You want to have qualifying and do whatever. Friday and Saturday is IndyCars. Saturday before IndyCars, and then after you have Sunday for the Cup. That's what it used to be forever. It worked for decades. It speaks to what Joe was saying. It worked forever. Why change it? It's stupid. BZF, part of why there are a lot of what's wrong with NASCAR is what BZF did, and a lot of people that are still there kind of think like him, unfortunately.
I think too, especially with how little downforce the Xfinity cars produce now, I think IRP would be such a fun race. Not to knock the Indy road course. I think road courses in general with the strategy elements are quite fun. But with the stages, you lose some of that. And I feel like the Xfinity Series, right? You got durable bodies, use them, send them out on a short track, bump them up a little bit, right? Yeah. I think that would be so fun to have trucks and Xfinity at IRP.
That's what it was for a decade and a half, and it worked fine. It was a great weekend at Indianapolis. You'd have USAC racing on Thursday, trucks on Friday, you had USAC racing on Wednesday, trucks on Thursday, Xfinity on Friday, and the Brickyard 400 on Saturday. And that was how it was from 1995 to the year 2000. And then TV decided to move the Brickyard 400 to Sunday, and then it started it. Then it became Thursday, Friday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So they still had that. And then they started effing with it really bad. Then they took the races away from IRP, which was stupid. And that was right when Forrest Lucas and company bought into the track. So they weren't exactly happy about that. So trucks going back there is a good thing. ARCA's there, but they need to go and bring the Xfinity Series back there. Same way as they probably have to go to Fairgrounds. Same way as they probably have to go to... it depends on what they're going to do with Wilkesboro. I think trucks and Xfinity might be an idea for Wilkesboro. But I guess let me get into the points here before we move forward. I'll let you... And I'll also bring up the fact that both myself and Joe were right on our calls during the Cup recap, which went a while. I said that Ward Burton, Joe Nemechek, and Jeff Burton all finished in the top 5 in the Pocono race. in July of 94. I was right. They finished second, third, and fourth. So just like the three rookies that finished, so Cindric and Gilliland and Burton, or Burton and Gilliland, whatever, second, third, and fourth. Same situation here. Ward Burton finished second. Joe Nemechek finished third. Jeff Burton finished fourth. Jeff Bodine, Ward Burton were on the front row of that race in the Miller Genuine Draft 500 at Pocono. Jeff Burton started fourth in the Stavola Brothers Ray Bestis Ford. So rookies finishing 2, 3, and 4 in a Cup Series race. I mean, I know we don't have enough listeners where they're going to go and correct me, so we're just going to work under the pretense that I'm right. And then so is Joe, because the last time, did I just see T.W. Taylor? I saw a random T.W. Taylor thing just come up there. Phil, yeah, I thought I saw T.W. Taylor, but and then Joe talked about Front Row Motorsports. They got a 1-2 finish in that race with Reagan and Gilliland at Talladega in 2013. They're racing darkness there in that spot. Darkness! But yeah, the next truck race will be at Richmond here next week, not this coming weekend, but next week. There'll be the undercard for the Cup Series at Richmond on Saturday night, and then there'll be a Sunday mid-afternoon race for the Cup Series. They say inaugural T-Sport. See, how can you say it's I guess because it's been so long, but I think that's false advertising because they've raced there so many times, but whatever. Zane Smith goes into Richmond with a 14-point lead over Ben Rhodes. Grant Enfinger is now tied with Stuart Friesen in third place, 22 points behind, but is locked in into the next round. And Stuart Friesen fourth, John Hunter Nemechek fifth, Chandler Smith sixth. After entering the playoffs second, he's now 26 points behind Zane Smith, 12 points behind second. And then Ty Majeski seventh, Carson Hocevar is on the cutoff and is 7 points ahead of Matt Crafton and Christian Eckes, the teammates, for the cutoff there. I guess before we move on, we talk about some of the racing and John Hunter Nemechek going and hitting a lot of stuff and a lot of guys doing things. I mean, I guess it's kind of what the Truck Series has become. A lot of daddy and mommy's money people being in the series, wrecking stuff, running into people. You kind of see it as we go up these levels. But John Hunter Nemechek has kind of made a name. On one hand, driving lesser equipment, of course, his family equipment and winning races, getting all the way to the Cup Series. We've heard now through DBC that he was supposed to be the guy through Denny Hamlin to be the sub, but all of a sudden in the last couple of weeks, instead of John Hunter Nemechek being that guy, Ty Gibbs got called as my light just fell over. The fact of the matter is John Hunter Nemechek had a really bad night at IRP, and it might be because of that, but you're in a position to possibly win a championship. You would think that you'd be able, with being a veteran in this series, some of the decisions and some of the moves that John Hunter Nemechek made in that spot, Joe, were quite questionable.
Yeah, I was not fond of what he said post race about sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug, and tonight we were the bug. Yeah, you had some instances tonight, but really, except for one, they were self-inflicted, man. And I don't get it. I mean, I get it. You were in an unlucky situation where you pretty much had to split a lap car to try and keep your position, but you hit the grass, you came up and you ran into the guy. You just happened to be the one who spun, right? That's kind of on you, man, right? You're the one trying to make the pass. You don't need to get that aggressive, especially at the point of the race which that happened. So, that's I don't know. I don't have a lot of sympathy for that. It sucks, yeah, but you do exactly what he did. You find a way to rebound. Gets back up towards the front, just totally doors. Or I'm sorry, no, he just dumped the 17 of I believe it was Tanner Gray is the one running that car. I get the two of them confused, Tanner and Taylor, and I always feel bad. But he dumped the Gray, number 17.
Taylor, because Tanner's the regular. Okay. He's in the 15. Tanner's in the 15. Gotcha. He's the post-stock driver.
Dumps Taylor Gray. And I don't know in that situation how you're the bug, right? You're the windshield there. And then, he kind of, karma came to him and he got doored by the 38. So it was an eventful night for John Hunter nonetheless. And I understand being frustrated because things didn't go your way. But you'd look a lot more innocent in your comments if you didn't just wreck someone 15 laps ago. Yeah, simple as that. So I wasn't quite fond of what he said. I think, and I have another friend who I talk about with this sometimes because he feels like there's no respect. I feel like it's a combination of very little respect, but it's also a combination, NASCAR, the point system, the way that, you are almost subliminally encouraged to race is very aggressive. And plus it's natural, in the truck series, you get a lot of yellows, some more inexperienced drivers. But I mean, there were drivers who are in the playoffs who have more than enough experience and common sense to not pull the crap that they did during the race. And the fact that they did do that, to me, this was one of the first times I was really angry after a race. And I really said, I'm not so sure that has to do with the whole racing hard and boys have at it mentality. I think that there is, after that race or during that race, serious lack of respect and common sense to other drivers. I mean, there was no reason for Hunter to get out of the car and for him to make the comment he made. I mean, to me, that's almost like he didn't even realize he wrecked somebody, right? If he made that comment, there was no situation with Taylor Gray, you're good because your night was rough. But even though your night was rough, you battled back, right? But dude, you just dumped a guy. You have no ground to stand on, right? You're upset because you got doored on the last lap. It's karma, man. It happens. It's racing. And then too, there was an incident where somebody, I don't remember who, because I was just so stunned and appalled by this. Somebody just kind of tapped Carson Hocevar out of the way. And, Hocevar slid up the track. It was all good. They go onto the straightaway. Truck passes Hocevar. Going into the turn, Hocevar dumps him. I mean, it wasn't even going to the turn. It was just past the start finish.
Oh, it was Colby Howard. Yeah.
Yeah, Colby Howard, right?
Best run that Colby Howard's had all year.
Oh, my God.
And Carson Hocevar lost his mind on him, yeah.
I mean, what the hell was that, man? Really, honestly, I would love to know what Hocevar was thinking because, I mean, I don't know if there's something that we as fans missed because the camera was not focused on the 42. There were other things happening on the track.
Which is possible since FS1's coverage is horrible.
But I also haven't seen any comments from Hocevar. I haven't seen any other comments from Howard that would indicate that, yes, they were having some type of on-track indifference at that time, right? So what happened? Were you mad he got around you and he bumped you to do it? So you decided, hey, I'm going to dump him? I mean, what the hell? Really, honestly. Driving like that is not going to get you a ride anywhere else, right? And I'm shocked that I haven't yet heard of any penalties, right? I mean, to me, this week had some pretty Gregson level, taking out Karam there. That it was that level to me. And it shouldn't go unpunished. I don't care that it's the playoffs. It shouldn't go unpunished. So I'll be very interested to see what NASCAR does. Granted, that race was on what was it, Friday night, Saturday night. So there's still a little bit of time. I think typically Tuesday and Wednesday are sort of the delayed penalty days. So we'll see tomorrow what happens. I don't know that they'll post anything for the 42, but I definitely had some issues with how people were racing people. Serious lack of respect, way too overly aggressive in a number of instances. And I mean, unfortunately, I think that's sort of the nature of the trucks now. But I really hope it gets cleaned up more so for the integrity of the product itself and what people watch. But it is what it is, right? I can't be there to officiate. Nobody can except for NASCAR, so they got to do what they got to do.
It's a problem. It's a big problem, the product that they have there. I forgot about Hocevar going and being like his mentor, Ross Chastain, and running over Colby Howard. I know that Carson Hocevar has a lot of talent, and he's not really truly able to show it. But the fact is, when he does, you see that equipment is not that good. But he's also not at the level or doesn't have the experience that Ross Chastain had and bad equipment to where he got into good equipment. And he's like, oh, I can drive it over to the next level. You can't do those sort of things, or those sort of things shouldn't happen. But then you look at the people that he's in the same level with, which is Ty Gibbs, Sam Mayer, et cetera, et cetera. They do the same kind of crap. So it's a culture thing. Smoke, Jeff Gordon, other guys, it was different for them. They drove like that, they'd have gotten run over, and then they would have gotten a talking to. Now it's just a bunch of talk, social media BS, and they'll just keep on wrecking equipment. You have a bunch of people that can't drive a hot nail through snow, and they're just going to destroy equipment. It's a function of where we're at, and it's sad. It's part of why I throw to Joe and I discuss things with Joe, because he's into the sport way more than I am. I have my fandom, which is waning considering how bad Stewart-Haas racing is. I have my fandom in Xfinity. I really don't have any engagement with the truck series at this point. I did when Sheldon Creed was there. Now that he's in Xfinity and struggling, it's whatever. I don't care about the trucks. The trucks are dying. The truck series is dying. I don't care that Craftsman is going to supposedly come back to be the sponsor. They're not the same company now as they were, whatever it is, in 1995, 37 years ago, 27 years ago, my bad. 37 years ago. I am 37. 27 years ago when they came into the sport, it's not the same thing. Truck series is dying. ARCA series is dying. NASCAR, if they're serious, if Ben Kennedy wants to come up with all these gimmicks, the next thing Ben Kennedy has to come up with is how are you going to go and make the ARCA series affordable and make it a series where people can come in and learn without having to run over everybody, and actually you have like a checks and balances system. And then from there, you go and make truck series, or you decide to make a in-between thing, because the Xfinity Series is starting to leak oil too. Their calendar is probably a bit too big. Leasing engines, certain things, the composite bodies. I mean, if it wasn't for Dale Jr. and Kelly, if it wasn't for some of these Cup owners, Matt Collig, the Xfinity Series is leaking oil too. They're not in a good place. You needed, the Cup Series was starting to go there too. You needed this next gen, the Gen 7, to get Justin Marks to invest and Matt Collig to invest. You had Carl Long there, but because of the way you're treating the charter system, you lost him. The Henseman team is there, but they're not going to buy into a charter no matter how much money they have, whether it's legal or illegal. Danny Kvyat has Russian money. Who knows? Maybe he could invest. Or Jacques Villeneuve might be able to invest because he's got millions and millions of dollars. He's lost a lot of hair, but he hasn't went and done the LeBron James for Hair Club for Men. He's just lost all his hair. He's a cue ball-headed fool. Okay. We are, undo that. Indianapolis Road Course. I'm going to run through some things here because we're running kind of long. There you go. Not to fill this position. Oh, lovely. They sent that to me now. That's convenient. Fuck them. The Indy Road Course saw the IndyCar Series go and run their second race of 2022 at Roger Penske's house. We will go to this right here. Why do I not have that? Going to that. So Alexander Rossi win his first race in 3 years at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They promote it on their website, Rossi Roars to Big Win at Indianapolis. The story was written by Paul Kelly. The results see Alexander Rossi win by 3.54 seconds over Christian Lundgaard, who qualified in the Firestone Fast 6, and re-emphasizes his being the likely Rookie of the Year. Hasn't gotten as much promotion as David Malukas, who was my pick for Rookie of the Year earlier this season, and Kyle Kirkwood, who's struggled all year. Will Power finishes third, Scott McLaughlin fourth, Joseph Newgarden fifth. So the Penske cars at Penske's house, third, fourth, and fifth. Rinus VeeKay, who probably is getting a lot of phone calls these days about his availability to take over rides, finished sixth. Graham Rahal seventh. Had a better car than that. Can't get qualifying together. That's why he ended up finishing seventh after starting 17th. Scott Dixon started 20th, finished 8th. Felix Rosenqvist from the pole finished 9th, so didn't have the greatest run there. Alex Palou, defending series champion, who's in the news these days, started 7th, finished 10th. Marcus Ericsson had to do an engine change, so had to start in the back. The points leader, the Indy 500 champion, finishes 11th. So Ganassi cars 8th, 10th, and 11th. Pato O'Ward coming off a victory, finished 12th. Then the rookies, Malukas, Kalamilot, 13th and 14th. And we'll go from there. The points going into this weekend's race at, you get into, they don't show the lead laps or whatever lead change, leader summary. Rossi led 44 laps. Colton Herta had led 17 laps and had a mechanical issue. So that was basically the determining factor there. Scott McLaughlin led 10 laps. Will Power led 7. Felix Rosenqvist led the first 7 laps of the race. But Rossi dominated the race. Big win for him. He's 8th in points. He's still sort of in it, but, it's going to take a lot with a few races to go. The Penske guys kind of made their move and put themselves into position. Will Power's within 10 points. You have McLaughlin, he's right on the periphery. Newgarden's still there. We're starting to get to a point where the guys that are going to go and run for this championship, you have to go and narrow it down. Will Power is now 9 points ahead of Marcus Ericsson going into Nashville, where Ericsson won last year. Nashville, or Tennessee's Joseph Newgarden, is 32 points behind his teammate Will Power. Scott Dixon is in 4th. Will Power's 5th. Pato O'Ward's 5th. Alex Palou is 6th. Trying to look at guys who are within 100 points. McLaughlin is still within that 100-point threshold. Newgarden, or Rossi, who just won, is in 8th, but he's over 100 points back, so we need to go and he'd probably have to win out if he could go crazy like that, which he's done that before in this series. He has a chance. Rosenqvist and Colton Herta, after brutal DNF, another DNF, which is part of what's going to hurt him in regards to super license points. If Zach Brown wants to use him as a Formula One driver, He needs super license points, and he's not going to get them when his car's failing. I know you watched, Joe. Did you have any takeaways from the race on Saturday, the first part of the 3 races at Indianapolis, before we move towards Formula One?
Not in particular. I like to, when I can, watch IndyCar. It's a little hard on my schedule, especially when I'm also trying to follow the stock cars. But really what I wanted to see was, so just what could I learn about the circuit in general? I thought the strategy in this race was much more dynamic, to me at least, than Cup or Xfinity. And, even I feel weird saying that almost, because it wasn't like Cup didn't have any strategy, and it wasn't like Xfinity didn't have any strategy. But I feel like with the road courses, in that sense, they become so much more, they become more straightforward. Hey, you're going to kind of pit here, or you're not going to pit here. We're going to take the stage, and then we'll pit here. They won't pit here, and then they'll take another stage. So it's cool to kind of see that whole the far length overall run without the stages. And it's also cool and interesting to someone who, I would think the only stock car race where this has been a thing was one of the all-star races in 2018 or 19 or something, with having different tire compounds, right? And how that changes the race and how that fluctuates. I wasn't fully in it just because I was getting ready to go to my New Egypt Speedway gig. But I did find what I did watch, I thought was extremely interesting, and trying to pinpoint and learn all those different things, but very dynamic strategy, especially with the tires. And overall, just, I think it's more fun for me because I'm not so vested in it in some sense.
Yeah, and it's something that with IndyCar, they allow the whole race to happen. There was issues with Simon Pagenaud where they were questioning throwing yellow, or they left the green out long enough to let the leaders pit before it ruined the strategy, which has been an issue over time, where if there's something where they have to throw a full course yellow and you haven't pitted, it'll go and flip the strategy, same way as they talk about NASCAR on road courses. And that became an issue. That became part of the discussion on Saturday, because they left that green flag out longer than they probably would have in other circumstances. But what are you going to do? You're damned if you do, damned if you don't in that sense. IndyCar has had some questionable calls this year, but nothing compared to what NASCAR is usually known for in that going and making those calls. And Pagenaud, of course, former multiple winner of this track, having a mechanical very early in the race. So unfortunate for him, and unfortunate for the Meyer-Shank team in general going into Nashville this weekend. Looking for a recovery there. Rossi dominated. The leaders were basically 3 of the top 4. Rosenquist led the first 7 laps of the race. Something we will see the points we went over. So Formula One, we had the Hungarian Grand Prix last week. We were hoping, I guess, if you're a non-Max Verstappen person, you're hoping for somebody other than Max Verstappen to win. Well, that didn't happen. He's going to win this championship. I said it on the Grid Talk podcast. If you really want to have real detail and driver by driver digging into it, for sure, listen to the Grid Talk podcast, the recap from the race on Sunday. It's on their YouTube page and on all social media channels. I was on that show. So to be quick, Verstappen won from 10th. He won by 7.83 seconds over Sir Lewis Hamilton. George Russell started on pole, finished 3rd. Carlos Sainz finished 4th after starting 2nd. Sergio Perez finished 5th after starting 11th. So for 1st and 5th for Red Bull after starting 10th and 11th, at one of the toughest racetracks to pass on. Charles Leclerc started 3rd, led 14 laps, finished 6th. because it's Ferrari. That's really all you can say. Lando Norris, Fernando Alonso, Esteban Ocon, and Sebastian Vettel round out your points finishers at Hungary. Norris was the last car in the lead lap in 7th position. Ferrari, over these last couple of races, has given up a ton of points with strategy calls. Right now, Max Verstappen has an 80-point lead over Charles Leclerc in the World Drivers' Championship, which is 3 races with fastest laps, plus a couple extra points just for fun. Sergio Perez is only 5 points behind Charles Leclerc for second in points, but don't look now. George Russell is in that mix. He's only 20 points out of second. Carlos Sainz is 22 points out. And Lewis Hamilton is 32 points out, and he has 6 podium finishes, which is same number as Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez. Lewis Hamilton hasn't gotten a pole yet this year, but I figure that is coming. The fact of the matter is, in regards to average finish, Lewis Hamilton is actually third in average finish. 5.1 average so far, and he's finished every race. The only 2 people ahead of him, of course, are his teammate George Russell and Verstappen, who in the races he's run at the finish of 11 out of 13 races. Of those 11, he's won 8 and he's podiumed in 10. So that sounds like a champion. He's going to win this championship. The constructors isn't much different in that sense. Getting into the constructor standings, they're nearly 100 points ahead of Ferrari. They're 97 points ahead of Ferrari, while Ferrari's only 30 points ahead of Mercedes in second place. The battle for fourth is quite interesting, too. Only 4 points between Alpine and McLaren. Both Alpines scored points on Sunday, while only Lando Norris scored for McLaren. The rest of it is kind of more straightforward. AlphaTauri is only 7 points ahead of Aston Martin. Haas is 7 points ahead of AlphaTauri, so that can kind of change. There's 14 points amongst those 3 teams. Things I will look at in regards to upgrades going into the summer break, what will come from that. There'll be time to go and look into all those things and whether anything will get crazy. But I'll bring Joe back into it. I mean, you were talking about it with Oscar Piastri. It's a big news day in regards to that. Formula One, as I mentioned, Sebastian Vettel announces retirement. It's like talking about Jimmy Johnson. He's essentially in that same realm. Came in around the same time, became a champion early in his career, was dominant, 4-time world champion, 53 wins in his career. So it's akin to Jimmy Johnson, kind of in that way. And announces his retirement. He's a great humanitarian. And the fact is, what I think he's going to do away from Formula One, if he doesn't race anymore, which I don't know why he wouldn't, he's still got talent, is going to be a big deal because of how great he is and how good of a person he is. And it kind of fits that Jimmy Johnson realm in that sense, too. And he's very young. He's younger than me, for sure. Older than you, but, we're in between that. But, he announces his retirement last week, goes and makes his social media, makes his Instagram, and announces his retirement. And since then, the Formula One paddock has been flipped on its lid because Fernando Alonso, I mentioned, finished in the points again at Hungary and announced that he's going to Aston Martin to replace Sebastian Vettel. Now, I mean, if you really want to dig into it, it's one thing. We've went long in this show, probably going to get into it more the next episode, but to get, and I'm going to do a show with Tom Downey from Everything F1. Probably will get into that more in that episode somewhere. So be aware of that on the social media channels where you can find that. We'll probably dig into all of this stuff that's going on. Oscar Piastri, the Formula 2 champion, was tabbed to go and take over. Everybody thought that once Alonso made the shock move. In the end, Oscar Piastri says, no, I'm not going to go and drive for Alpine in 2023 because he sounds like he signed with McLaren, which I guess if you
seems to be a common theme here.
Common theme, yeah, where if you're Pato O'Ward, who is an IndyCar driver, but he has an option. You have Colton Herta, who has a Formula One testing contract with McLaren, but of course he's an Andretti driver. And, Michael Andretti's trying to get into Formula One. You have Felix Rosenqvist, who's been running really well in IndyCar this year. And McLaren signed him on an option to either be an IndyCar or Formula E, because they're going to Formula E. They're taking over the Mercedes Formula E program for this next season, starting here in I guess this season ends in August, and then the next season starts later in the winter. Then you have Oscar Piastri, who has been signed by Zach Brown to be the teammate for Lando Norris, even though Daniel Ricciardo is still signed and has a contract till 2023 to drive in Formula One for McLaren. And you add the fact that you got guys like Zhou Guan Yu, who's a former Alpine Academy driver. You have Pierre Gasly, who's French and wants an out from Red Bull, theoretically, and re-signed with AlphaTauri, but really there's no way that he's going to get back into a main Red Bull car. You talk about Ricciardo used to drive for the Alpine team after leaving Red Bull. You've got, we said the top three teams are locked in for next year more than likely. But after that, I think you could just blow things up. Haas, you would assume, would keep their two drivers with Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher, but maybe Mick Schumacher's in play. He is a talent. He's young. He's now scored points. He's got potential. Kevin Magnussen is a good development driver. He understands how to get the most out of a car. He might be in play. You have Williams. There's at least one seat for sure that probably is open because Alex Albon is going to stay. I think they're going to keep him because he's done a good enough job. He's not George Russell. He's not his BFF George Russell, but he's a good driver. Could that be Logan Sargent? Could an American get back on the Formula One grid? He needs to finish in the top three in the F2 points to have enough super license points to make that happen, which is why Colton Herta, Pato O'Ward, unless Pato O'Ward finishes third in the championship this year, he'd have enough. That might change things up a little bit. If Zhou became a thing for Alpine, that would open up a seat at Alpha Sauber for a Ferrari development driver, a la Eilot, who re-signed with the Juncos Hollinger team. But if you're getting called to go to Formula One, maybe you're going to go and make that move. So there's I guess contracts or announcements don't really matter much anymore because at least now this is a second instance of joke's on you. I'm going to say I'm not driving there. Tyler Reddick, it's not hard to hide him. He's like 4'5", and he snuck into 2311 randomly on his phone. He's like, oh, I don't know where I am. And the next thing you know, he ends up right next to Denny Hamlin and blows up that presser. I bet you wish you were on that freaking call talking about Yeah,
to
that would
do.
have been something that Tyler Reddick just randomly sneaks in to that. I kind of want to be the fly on the wall in Otmar Safnau's office that he might have lost a two-time Formula One world champion, or he's lost a two-time Formula One world champion who's holding on for dear life because he doesn't have anything else to live for, and he hates Lewis Hamilton. And then you're going to lose one of the best young prospects in recent history, possibly a person that could be the first Australian world champion since Alan Jones in Formula One. They yearn for their great champions. They talk about Wayne Gardner and MotoGP in the 500 Grand Prix days. Alan Jones is still held up in a high regard. All the great champions that were in the supercars and stuff. Oscar Piastri is that kind of talent. And Alpine in one fell swoop has lost two young drivers and a two-time world champion. And they don't really have an answer for who's going to come back there. But I guess contracts don't matter for us people that don't have any money. But for them, if you're a lawyer or a liar, they're making a lot of money for sure. People are loving this on social media too. Drivers all over the world are loving what's going on, including IndyCar, Indy 500 champion Marcus Ericsson, who made multiple great posts about it today. Oh, I figured you were going to say something there.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry. It's, it seems really strange. It seems really chaotic. I mean, there have been crazy years in contracts for NASCAR. There have been crazy years in contracts for IndyCar. There have been crazy years in F1. I don't know if there's ever been such an intersection where we're seeing so much of this. I don't want to call it chaos, but for lack of a better word, so much of this chaos across the board, across the world's three major racing divisions, really. And it's fun to watch in some sense because it's like, ooh, what's going to happen next? But at the same time, you have to understand these are real people with real contracts, with real obligations. And, the fact that we've already gone to a lawsuit for one of them right now, I don't think it's going to happen in NASCAR. I think from what it sounds like, Reddick did everything that was by the book okay. It's more of a personal thing between how he did it and Richard Childress. And so, I think that's just more of they got to get over it. But when it comes to Chip Ganassi Racing and Alex Palou and McLaren, and now McLaren in Formula One, it's I can't help but wonder, is there something that McLaren is doing to get these drivers over? Like, what's their approach? What's their strategy? How are they getting these drivers over right now? And I mean, do these drivers and their teams, like what's happening, right? It makes me believe there's something greater behind the scenes going on that's leading to this stuff. And surely there always will be, because we'll never truly know 100% of what happens behind closed doors. But the fact that it's the same team, too, that's trying to acquire these two drivers, that's what kind of makes me think there's something more to this. I'd like to know. We probably won't know, if we ever know, until the Ganassi and McLaren and Palou case is heard. But this is fun. It's a little bit of fun to watch. But just general craziness across the board, it seems like. And this could be a silly season for all three series that we're going to remember and point to for a long time.
Yeah, and there's more to come. We haven't even heard the last of what's going on in Cup.
Just waiting for Kyle Busch announces something.
Yeah, Kyle Busch is still in play. There are options amongst all three manufacturers based on DBC, depending on who you listen, what you think. We talked about, Matt Collig, who has struggled so far in his entrance in the Cup, and they've had kind of a rough transitional year. Would you go and send everything to go and get Kyle Busch and get him back in the Chevy fold after his years with Hendrick? Ford lost Kyle Busch many years ago due to age restrictions and not being able to put him in a ride. Roush and Ford has always been known for giving up talent. It started with Jeff Gordon, went with Kyle Busch. You can go a long way. There's plenty of Ford fails over time, but can Gene Haas say, I'll do the same thing I did for your brother, because the fact is you're even better than your brother in terms of what you've done in NASCAR, and open the checkbook and say, here, I'll give you the 41 car and you can determine what you want to do. You could bring whoever the hell you want with you. And that could change the whole look of Ford, because Penske essentially is set with their drivers, because there's a lot of youth there. Logano's their leader. He ain't leaving. Shell Pennzoil ain't leaving. Doesn't look like they're going to leave Blaney, because he's essentially the real most popular driver. I don't care what Clyde fans think. He's the real most popular driver because he's actually developed his own fan base. He didn't need the fan bases of Jeff Gordon, Bill Elliott, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and then the people that I guess like Chase Elliott, all be his fan base. It's convenient. Fact is, Kyle Busch, if he moves to Ford, would be huge. And they talked about Dale Jr. talked about it on the download, that he has a lot of good years still in his prime if he cares. The question I have is, does Kyle Busch care still? Does he want to be? He's out there. He's a businessman. He's made his energy drink. He's got other things going on. Is he invested the same way as he used to be? I mean, he was when he was trying to get to 100 wins in Xfinity. He's already broken that truck record. He's the winningest driver in trucks in Xfinity. I don't think anybody's going to pass those now. It's going to take a lot.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm going to be honest. I just don't know how invested he is, because it seems like you get into a post-race interview or you see something on the social platforms and, he gets out of the car. He seems mad. I mean, Nashville, he just put the car on the wall and let it run, right? Let it glide to the finish on the wall. And he's still talented. I think Dale Jr. is right. He's still got time left to get wins and to be competitive, to compete for championships. But to me, it always seemed like Kyle was chasing something, like achievement-wise, right? And maybe it wasn't always so prominent, but, it was chasing the championship. Then it was chasing a win at every racetrack. Then it was chasing Xfinity and truck win records. And I mean, the only thing that he has left to do, I think, really across all three of the touring divisions, is just win the Daytona 500. That's the last thing. I honestly, if he didn't really care to drive Cup, I could see him coming back to do one-offs in the Daytona 500 just to try. And then, the rest of the 35 races a year, they're not with Kyle. To me, the fact that, though, there was a recent comment he made saying, basically, if I have to take a pay cut to stay, I'll do it. To me, that shows me he cares, right? If you're willing to take a pay cut doing something, it means you like doing that and you want to be there. But, I question how many more years will that be the case, because, very much like Kevin Harvick, who I think is also another driver, we're nearing the end of his career. Kyle Busch is a kid who is racing and winning in racing. And at what point do you say, I have achieved everything that I could possibly imagine, and maybe more. And I just, I have the money to be comfortable. I have a family back home who I want to spend more time with, and I want to watch my kid, move his way through the ranks, right? I think we're getting close to that point for both Harvick and for Kyle Busch. It seems like over the past few years, contract lengths have gotten relatively shorter. We used to see drivers sign for, 5, 6, maybe even 7 years in a long deal. But it's become a lot more of 1 year or 2 year. I don't even know if a 3-year contract has been signed anytime recently. So, I would expect that Kyle's contract most likely going to be a 1 year or 2 year, maybe a 3 year. I don't know. But I could see him signing maybe this one last contract if he's fortunate to get one, which he should be. I would imagine it would be silly for any company to not sponsor Kyle Busch. That's a fantastic way to get your company name out there. That could be it at that point. I think if he were to retire during this silly season, this off season, it would not be by his choice. If he signs a contract, maybe 2 years passes by. I think at that point we're talking Brexton is maybe cracking 10 or 11 years old. He's going to start probably at that point considering racing regional touring divisions, which I know it's crazy because he's that young still. But I think that might be the point that Kyle's hanging out till, and before he says, yeah, I'm done and I'm doing this on my terms. So I have to imagine we're going to see him next year. Crazier things have happened, but I imagine in some capacity he'll hang around the Cup Series for a little while longer.
It's just a case of who's going to cut the check. Rev Gibbs wants to go and keep a seat warm for a guy who he's had since 2008. Toyota has had no problem funding a car. The 20 car has been essentially partially funded by Toyota over the recent years, even when Matt Kenseth was there. So there's a possibility they'll do that here because Kyle Busch has essentially done that for Toyota to go and make their driver development program work. And in his case, you got to go and keep a great talent there. Martin Truex will be there next year, but as you look at things, he's probably not going to be around long term. It'll be Ty Gibbs. You'd also look at Denny Hamlin. Does he want to move? Can he convince Joe Gibbs, hey, I'll swap a charter with you because they've been pretty handy in getting their charters. I'll swap my charter to bring my team over to 2311 to be a third car over there, and then I'll swap a charter for you, and then you can pick up whatever identity you want to have there. You have 18, 19, and 20. Of course, the 17 is taken, 21's taken. Make number 81, whatever the hell number. You can come up with number 8, I guess, whatever, and make a fourth car and come up with some other driver. Because Ty Gibbs is going to be in one of those seats. You're going to have Kyle Busch more than likely, unless something crazy happens in one of those seats. Christopher Bell is a guy that Toyota's invested a lot of money in and is a great talent. They've already given up on Eric Jones for whatever reason. Lack of rides is part of it, and then sponsorship money. But if they give up on Christopher Bell, you want to talk about a race for talent to go and get him. Kyle Larson's going to be telling Rick Hendrick, figure out a way to put him in a car, get a charter, do something, because he knows that's one of the only people that can stay with him. Tony Stewart has missed. He wasn't able to get Kyle Larson. I would venture to say he'll tell Gene Haas to fuck himself to put him in one of those cars, whether it's a 10 or the 41, because those are the redheaded stepchildren of Stewart Haas Racing. Anyway, he'd get Christopher Bell. So, and then that doesn't include the fact that RFK had 4 cars, 5 cars back in the day, and Brad Keselowski wants to make something happen. You don't know. Maybe they got money. They got a lot of money. They got the money to get a charter. If it were me, if I was RFK, I'd buy out Rick Ware's charters straight up right now and get a satellite organization working. And I'd start being like, oh, we got a team. We got people. We got things in place. We got the cars. We're essentially going to combine resources because Front Row Motorsports ain't selling out. Bob Jenkins is in. He's going to do his thing. He ain't going to buy any more charters. He's got his team. And Todd Gilliland ain't leaving anytime soon. I think he's going to be there. McDowell's progression or upgrade because of the great work that sexy Caitlin Vincey's husband has done. Blake Harris showing that he probably, I don't know how he stayed as Martin Truex's engineer for as long as he did, because he's made Michael McDowell look like a legitimate Cup driver. If you put Zane Smith in that car, who knows? And have him and Todd Gilliland together, that would be next level stuff. Like, they had John Hunter, he only had a year, but he said, screw this, I'm going to go back to trucks. They'd have had that already. But you have Todd Gilliland and Zane Smith together learning this car, and you're building. That's for Ford, it's a big deal. For Front Row Motorsports, it's what that team is really supposed to be there for. And in turn, if Rick Ware, Joe, I'll throw to you on this before we get into the roundup. The charter situation, it sounds like 3 charters are up. Now, of course, with the way charters are situated, I think if you're in the bottom 3 for 3 years in a row, you have to give it up, which the Ware cars would kind of be in that role. The 78 Live Fast charter would be in a situation like that. And then the Spire 77 would definitely land in that spot. The fact that Corey LaJoie is outside of the top 30 in points right now also doesn't help. But they have one charter that theoretically is safe in that spot. But Spire, this is off of DBC, because what's his name didn't want to go and name names, but he said there were 3 charters that are in play, and you got your boy over there that's behind you that's looking for at least one, and we're not even thinking about the RCR scenario. Then you got 2311, who needs a charter on the basis of maybe they expand for Tyler Reddick, not getting rid of anybody, but the way things are looking, he's probably in a 45 car. And then Colleague is looking for a 3rd charter. That's what they said. And that doesn't account for other things that might happen. To me, Brad wants to have a super team. Why wouldn't you put yourself in a position now, angle and make a sub team and build it up? But what are your thoughts on that before we move in the roundup?
Yeah, so originally when this silly season really begun to shape up, I wasn't so sure this was going to be such a charter-heavy season, because it didn't seem like there were a lot of charters that were going to be up for grabs. There's one organization that I maybe, dependent on their situation, which is still a fluid situation, being Stewart-Haas Racing, thought maybe there was the possibility that team could downsize to 3 and give up a charter. But that may also be a very particular situation. I think that would be your situation where Almirola is for sure out. And because we know Harvick's contract is good through 2023, I think it would also pretty much mean that Almirola would be out, and you either have Custer or Kyle Busch as driver number 3. And if it's Kyle Busch, then that means Custer's probably in Xfinity or with a small team. So I still believe there may be, because I don't remember exactly what the comments were, but I was reading it on Twitter, and one of my friends who was at the track and had pit access apparently had heard crew members talking about it. But it does to me sound like there's maybe possibly the thought that they're selling the charter. Nothing's been said definitely like, yeah, we're thinking about selling it, but it sounds like they may be preparing to restructure a little around there at Stewart-Haas. But going off of the DBC conversation, those 3 charters, that makes me think, yes, this could be a very busy offseason with the charters again. Dale Jr., I think, it took until Nashville of this season for him to say it, but I think probably once the next gen stuff started coming out, I think they, he and Kelly were having conversations. They probably were pondering over it for, I'm going to say, a year, before we got to silly season 2021. Hamlin, he's been vocal. He wants another charter. And he's going to hold his business until he feels like some of NASCAR's business practices are a little bit better. That's not exactly what he said, but the gist of it. Colleague looking to expand and get a third charter. So there's definitely some possibility for things to happen this year. I'm going to be honest. I don't necessarily know if it's a great idea at this point in time for RFK to expand and get the third charter. I think they need to invest a little bit more in the current infrastructure first. However, maybe they do that and then, 2023 silly season rolls around. They're a little bit better, a little more consistent. I think at that point, then they can consider, because I know Brad wants to build the super team, but I also think Brad's really logical as a business person to where he'll say now might not be the right time. And we need to keep the cash flow within the team and not pouring anything out to NASCAR, to a different team to get that extra charter. It's actually an interesting situation, though, that I hadn't given much thought to, is if Brad wanted to expand. Now, if we have 4 charters, the only teams I know that are looking for charters are the 4 that we've named tonight. So if there's 4 charters available and there's 4 teams looking for charters, that's going to make it really easy because the demand and the supply are equal, right? It's not like last year where we had a lot of demand, and we know there are teams who did not get charters that were looking for them, that were seeking them. That I think is part of what drove up that price to $12 million at one point. And that is assuming 12 million was the high, because we still don't know and probably never will know how much money Trackhouse and Justin Marks purchased Ganassi out of the sport for. So I think there's some possibility that there is charter fluctuation. I do think that there's a very likely chance there's at least 2 organizations that come in a 2023 Cup Series with an additional charter, or just simply a charter that had moved, a charter that had not been there before. I think also a lot of people forget the option. It's possible for teams to lease out a charter, right? This was something that I believe colleague was doing, or not colleague, Spire was doing. They were leasing charters. So
Spire and Rick Ware.
Yeah, so it's not impossible to see a situation like that. I don't know how specific the rules are to where, if you're in that bottom 3, can you still own the charter and just lease? You have to lease it out to a team, or do you have to sell it? I don't know the technicalities that well. I do believe you have to sell it and get rid of it. But that, I think, just adds another layer, right? Because maybe you have Kyle Busch not coming to Joe Gibbs Racing. And if Joe Gibbs is really dead set that it's too soon to bring up Ty, I don't think they're going to put John Hunter in the car. I really don't know. But then that adds in, hey, maybe do they lease out a charter from Joe Gibbs Racing? I don't know. So I don't know that leasing is really going to play a heavy hand in this offseason. I think it's going to be more so outright buying, because we know we have 3 teams at least who want to outright buy a charter. So, but it's definitely interesting, and I think it's going to keep the situation very interesting and dynamic as we get later in the season. And August in general, I expect to be an interesting month because, with the points that we talked about earlier, and we're going to start the playoffs at the end of the month, or we're going to end the regular season rather. I expect that Kyle is probably going to have some type of news at the end of this month. We're expecting the schedule for the 2023 Cup Series this month. So it's going to be a busy off. I think this is really going to be a month that shapes up how 2023 is going to go.
Yeah, definitely. It's something we have to look at. And now, the TV deal is probably going to play into, the field. We had 43 cars forever. We're not in a place right now where 43 cars is viable based on the business model and whatever. But 40 cars is viable. Do you go and make 2 more charters, and then all of a sudden it becomes a free-for-all? To me, I would say that you should open the doors to people that aren't already in the Cup Series and open up 2 more charters. And then you still have 2 open spots for people that want to show up. You might make qualifying intriguing at certain races and see what happens. I think giving an opportunity to a MBM, perhaps a Hensman's team, perhaps, isn't a bad thing if they're able to show up every week and provide a car that isn't going to be a start and park. MBM can. There are good people there. I think they would be out there every week if there was money to make it viable. After that, I'm not so sure, though I think the way things are in Xfinity and trucks, there would be some entities that would be available to go and make another charter work. That isn't strictly a business deal like Spire and like Rick Ware Racing. All right, let's get into the roundup. We'll do this as quick as possible. This thing has been going for a while. In F2 last week, we had, Logan Sargent. I'll say this: Logan Sargent will be doing an FP1 practice at the U.S. Grand Prix, which is huge. First time since 2015 an American has been on the grid. So that was Alexander Rossi at the U.S. Grand Prix. So that's pretty cool. Logan Sargent is in play, possibly to move up to Formula One next year if things go a certain way. In race one, he qualified on, no, he didn't. That was last race. He qualified sixth in race one, and then he was fifth in race two after the race. So Jack Doohan won race one over Yuri Vips and Enzo Fittipaldi. Felipe Drogovic finished fourth, Frederick Vesti fifth, Liam Lawson sixth, Marcus Armstrong seventh, Iwasa eighth, Teo Pourchaire ninth, Ali Caldwell 10th. In race two, Teo Pourchaire wins over Enzo Fittipaldi, Iwasa third, Frederick Vesti fourth, Yuri Vips fifth, Armstrong sixth, Lawson seventh, Vishor eighth, Drogovic ninth, and Logan Sargent 10th. J.M. Daruvula finished 11th. The standings going into the break, Felipe Drogovic is 21 points ahead of Teo Pourchaire. Logan Sargent, after a great three-race run, the last 2 weekends have seen him only score 4 points, which is brutal. Pourchaire has scored 45. Drogovic has scored 26. Enzo Fittipaldi has scored 25 the last 2 races to get himself within 19 points of Logan Sargent for that third place, which if you can finish in the top 3 in the F2 championship, you'd have enough super license points to move up to Formula One. So that's something we're looking at. Enzo Fittipaldi's up there. Jehan Daruvula is 5th. He is 25 points out. Frederick Vesti is 28 points out, and Iwasa's 29 out in 7th. So the points between Enzo Fittipaldi and Yuri Vips from 4th to 10th is only 15 points. 4th to 11th is 21. Marcus Armstrong there. So interesting battle. Logan Sargent's trying to stay up there in the top 3, could possibly change some things up in regards to the grid next year in Formula One. The results in Formula 3, Caio Collet wins race 1 at Hungary over Franco Colapinto. Kushmaini, so MP Motorsports, gets a 1-3. Isaac Hadjar and Oliver Bierman round out the top 5. Victor Martins, Gregor Saucy, Oliver Greth, and Roman Stanek and Zane Maloney round out the top 10. In race 2, Smollier, Maloney, Bierman are the podium. Zach O'Sullivan finishes 4th. Americans Jack Crawford and Juan Manuel Correa finish 5th and 6th. Kushmaini finishes 7th, the Indian driver. Artur Leclerc 8th, Caio Collet 9th, and Victor Martins rounds out the top 10. Hadjar is tied with Martins for the points lead, 9 points ahead of Artur Leclerc. Jack Crawford is 24 points behind in 4th. Bierman is tied with him. Stanek is 6th, 11 points behind Crawford and Bierman. Smollier, Collet, Colapinto, Maloney round out the top 10. Kushwaidi is 12th. Correa and American Kalen Frederick, they're all clustered together, 12th through 14th. Trying to go through here, Brad Benavides. Hunter Yeany hasn't scored points. And then, so there's that. Got through that. So in W Series, Alice Powell wins, breaks to Jamie Chadwick, stranglehold, beats her by just under a second. So Alice Powell gets her first win of the season. Chadwick second, Betske Visser third, Marta Garcia and Abby Pulling your top 5. Rowan, Moore, Eaton, Noda, Tomaselli round out the top 10. American. Chloe Chambers finishes just outside of the points. Got hit there in the race, so fell behind. Chadwick is still runaway points leader, 35 and 78 points ahead of Alice Powell in the championship with 3 rounds to go. Powell and Visser tied, and then Pulling is only 2 points behind that, so that's an intriguing battle. Marta Garcia rounds out the top 5. Chloe Chambers scored in the first race in Miami and hasn't scored since. There are 3 drivers that haven't scored points, and Juju Noda scored her first points in Hungary, so she's 5 points behind Chloe Chambers. Their next race is Japan, so it's going to be a while before the W Series races again. Formula E raced in London. The results in the London E Prix, So in race 1 of the London E Prix, saw Jake Dennis for Andretti Autosport win over Stoffel Van Dorn, Nick Cassidy on the podium. Oliver Askew gives Andretti Autosport a 1-4. The American driver, best result for him. Mitch Evans rounds out the top 5. Nick DeVries, the defending champion, 6th. DaCosta, 7th. Gunther, 8th. DeGrassi, 9th. Pascal Wehrlein rounds out the top 10. In race 2, Luca DeGrassi over Jake Dennis. Nick DeVries rounds out the podium. Van Dorn, DaCosta, Buemi for Dams, Nissan Dams, Frines, Sam Bird, Sergio Sete Camara for Dragon, and Pascal Wehrlein rounds out the top 10. Going into the points, Stoffel Van Dorn is 36 points ahead of Mitch Evans, and he is 41 points ahead of Eduardo Mortara. And with 2 rounds to go at Seoul, South Korea here next week. Vern, DaCosta round out the top 5. DeGrassi, so the battle between DaCosta, DeGrassi, both champions of the series. And then you had Robin Frines, the defending champion, Nick DeVries. They're all separated by 10 points, so that's in good battle there. Dennis is in 9th, and then Verline is close with his teammate Andre Lauderer at Porsche, and then Nick Cassidy is in 12th. We'll talk about it more next week in the preview for the finales there at Seoul, South Korea. Supercars were at the Bend last weekend. The results of race 1 saw Shane Van Gisbergen win over Will Davison, Chaz Mostert, Cameron Waters, and Zach Best. Anton De Pasquale finished 9th there in race 2. Van Gisbergen gets another win over Mostert. Courtney K. Waters, Anton De Pasquale, Brock Feeney finished 6th. SVG is nearly 200 points up. He has been dominant this year. He is 186 points ahead of Anton De Pasquale, and he is 240 ahead of Will Davison in 3rd. So Cam Waters, Chaz Mostert run out your top 5. As they get ready, the next race they'll be running is Sandown in 3 weeks' time. SVG is going to win. He's been looking at NASCAR. He's bored. I get why, because when you have nobody to drive against, you're going to look for other options. The World Superbikes ran this past weekend in the Czech Republic, which saw in race one, saw Alvaro Bautista beat Toprak Raskat-Lioku for the win, Scott Redding third, Johnny Ray fourth, all within 3 seconds. So it was actually a competitive race. Garrett Gerloff finished 10th. In the Super Bowl race, Toprak Raskat-Lioku beat Johnny Ray and Alvaro Bautista. That was the top three. Those are top three in the championship. Gerloff finished 9th. And in race two, Toprak Raskat-Lioku beats Alvaro Bautista, Johnny Ray, Scott Redding. The top three were separated by 2.83 seconds. Then you had Scott Redding, Axel Bassani. Garrett Gerloff was the last finisher. He had issues, I guess, during the race. In the points battle is 21 points between Bautista and Ray. Toprak is 38 points back. Yeah, 38 points back in third. That's what it is. 3-horse race, a lot of season to go. So very compelling in that sense amongst those top three. And that's mainly because Raskat-Lioku in the last 2 weekends has been outstanding. Something to say, defending champion wanted to go and hold up his honor there. Gerloff is 12th. He's only 24 points out of the top 10, but he needs to gain a lot more to get up further than that. He could get up. He could, if he goes over his head for a couple of weekends, he could get himself up to at least 7th, maybe 5th or 6th, but he would need to have some help. There's, was it 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 total rounds, but not all the points are equal in that with the Super Bowl race, et cetera, et cetera. IMSA will be running this weekend at Road America in the they'll be racing there, the Fast Lane Sports Car Weekend at Road America. You'll have everything: Pilot Challenge, WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. You'll have Porsche Carrera Cup, and Lamborghini Super Trofeo. And go and bring that up. Trying to go and see, Road America. You'll see that there. The entry list for the Fastlane Sports Car Weekend. 12. 37 cars. The usual suspects: the 2 Acuras, the 4 Cadillacs in DPI, 6 LMP2s. Got Pierre Matheson with 2 cars, Tower Motorsport with 1, Aero Motorsport with 1, High Class with 1, and Dragon Speed with Hendrik Henman, 1, Pablo Montoya there as well. LMP3 will have 9 cars. JDC Miller will be running a LMP2 this weekend, so that's new. MLT Motorsport, never seen them before. They'll be there as well. The rest of the cars are the usual cars with AWA, JR3, Strong Creek Motorsport, etc., etc. In GT Pro, only 5 cars, 1 Corvette, 1 Porsche, Corvette for Garcia and Taylor, Matt Campbell, Matthew Jaminet, Pfaff Motorsports Porsche, the Vassar Sullivan Lexus for Hawksworth and Barnacote, the Harder Racing Aston for Gunn and Riberas, and then the BMW for Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan, Connor DeFilippi, John Edwards. 11 cars in the GT Daytona category, and 2 BMWs, 1 for Paul Miller and 1 for Turner Motorsports, so Northeast guys, New Jersey and Connecticut. You'll have 3 Mercedes, the Korthoff car, Mike Skeen, McAleer, Russell Ward, Philip Ellis for Windward, and then the WeatherTech car for Cooper McNeil and Daniel Juncanella. The Acura for Rick Ware with Ryan Eversley and Aiden Reed. 2 Lamborghinis, the Carbon car for McGuinness Westfall, and then Jaden Conwright and Marco Holzer for NTE SSR. And then you have the Aston Martin for Roman DeAngelis, Maxime Martin, Harder Racing. The Lexus for Frankie Montecalvo, Aaron Teelitz, Vassar Sullivan, and then the Porsche Wright Motorsports, Hardwick and Halen. You have to have, next year, you're going to have a bronze driver in the GT Daytona category, or else you would be in the GT Pro. So that's something we'll see how that all works out. And they're doing they're going to submit for the driver grades and the medal, whatever the levels, they're regrading everybody. So that'll go and change how things are for driver ratings and levels and the whole bit in that. So something to look at. MotoGP and Moto2 will be at Silverstone as they return this weekend after their break, after their summer break or whatever, just like Formula One's having right now. The MotoGP standings, going to this. MotoGP standings going into this weekend's race. Fabio Quartararo is 21 points out of Alicia Spargaro, and that's really where the championship is at. Quartararo is coming off of 2 wins, and then if you're going to go further back over the last 6 rounds, he has 3 wins and 2 seconds and no finish worse than 4th. In the same time frame, Espargaro has finished 3rd four times, 4th twice, and 5th. So he's just a little bit off, trying to go and challenge for that championship there. A lot of stuff going on in regards to MotoGP. Aprilia, though, is leading the team's championship by 16 over Yamaha and Ducati. Something to look at there. Ducati definitely leads the constructor standings. In Moto2, the standings see Celestino Vietti tied with Augusto Fernandez, and Ayagura is only a point behind. So intriguing battle as we get into the second half of the season. Joe Roberts is 6th in points, 49 points out of the lead, but within reason. So maybe if he puts a run together, he could possibly go and win the championship. But you need a lot of help. As my phone decided to go and do a voice chat. So let's get into the Michigan preview there, Joe. I know it's been going for a while, so I guess I'll give it to you. You can go and tell me what I'm supposed to look at, and I'll go and riff off of you. What are we supposed to be looking at this weekend for Cup and Xfinity for Michigan International Speedway?
All right. So with Xfinity, I think we're going to see a different race than Cup. Yes, it's, you can attribute that to many different factors, but really the reason I say that is kind of what we talked about earlier. I think from here on out, these next 4 races, if you're in Cup and you're not a winner already, you need to win, right? And I think that we're going to see people, I think that's going to hit this week. We spoke about it earlier. Michigan's sort of a place where you can employ different fuel strategies and while it may not necessarily help you in the stages, it should be able to help you throughout the race and over the course of that last run. So I have to imagine we're going to have some fuel strategy talks, some people maybe not pit under those stage end yellows and such. I am not concerned about tires too much at this track at Michigan. And it seems like even in past weeks, towards the start of the season, it seemed like we had a rash, especially at fast tracks, with Kansas, with the tires just blowing out. Now we haven't seen that in recent weeks, where the tires they blow under green and such. I'm curious to see if tires do become an issue here, just because the tires do get stressed here a lot. They don't wear. There's never been really a super high amount of tire wear at Michigan because it is such a smooth, flat surface. Well, corners and straightaways aren't flat. It's an even surface, I should say, where everything is just very even all around. But it's not usually a track where tire wear is an issue. However, I'd be curious to see with the thinner sidewalls, if we're going to have something like we saw at Kansas, where we have a rash of, longer green flag runs lead to a series of tire failures, and so forth. But I'm really more looking at, I think, the fuel strategy, because I think that's really where a team could differentiate themselves and try to pull off a win if they don't yet have one. I don't know that drivers who already do have a win will get as aggressive. Maybe some of those who are a little closer to the bottom, to where if we got 2 or 3 winners, that they would be in danger. But I think that's really more so what I'm looking at. The only thing really like super racy, not strategy wise, that I'm really interested to see is what difference this car, the Cup car, makes with the diffuser, right? Is that diffuser going to clean the air up enough to where we're going to see a good bit of closing rate? How much is the draft going to come into this race? But for the most part, I would expect you're going to see a pretty typical Michigan race. You might have a few cars closer to the front of the field who break out, really kind of run the long green flag runs in a more dominant fashion. But I think for the most part, that's sort of where my head is at with the Cup race. Now, with the Xfinity race, I think you're going to see the same kind of thing you usually see in Xfinity. They're going to get long, strung out, long green flag runs. I'm not concerned about tires with Xfinity. Engines, perhaps. The engines are going to be under a lot of strain, a lot of RPMs at Michigan. But, for the most part, I feel like Michigan Xfinity, it is what it is. It hasn't changed for a very long time. Restarts can definitely be exciting, but over the course of the long run, don't get too excited. Don't hold your breath. Fuel strategy for both races. I'm only concerned about the tires in Cup. And just with Cup, the draft, the new car, how is it going to perform in an environment? Because, we go to some of those faster tracks, like I mentioned, Michigan and such, and they still spread out because you still, to some degree, are using some brake. I don't think you're going to see a lot of that this weekend. I don't know that we're going to see a lot of brake. I don't know that they're going to stay in the throttle the entire way, but I also don't think I think it might just be they lift it, they let, get off the gas, 1, 2, back on the gas. So that's really what I'm looking at as far as the racing and the strategy.
Who are you looking at for a winner and wild card for both of those races?
For both of those races. All right, so we'll start with Xfinity on this one. I like Josh Berry. And I know that might seem a random pick because he's more of a short track guy. The reason I like him is because of how
he won at Vegas last year.
Yeah, he won at Vegas last year. Tends to do pretty quietly well at some of these tracks. This track, I don't know if they've said yet whether they're going to lay down the resin or the grip strip or such on that outer line. Or rather, I think they do it at the inner line over here because usually the cars tend to be a lane up off that yellow line anyway. So I don't know if they're doing that this go around. I haven't heard anything yet. I'm sure it'll be announced within a day or so. But I really like him. He ran this race last year, filling in for Michael Annett. And I thought he had the best car. The way the cautions fell and just the way he got shuffled back didn't end up with a win for him. But I like Josh Berry as my favorite for Xfinity. My wild card for Xfinity, I'm going to go Brandon Jones. And I know he drives for Joe Gibbs Racing, so, maybe some people don't consider him a wild card. But he really only shows up once, twice, maybe 3 times a season where he's capable of winning. And some of these faster tracks with longer runs where he can pace himself, they seem to suit him well. He's had success at Kansas that way. Darlington, I wouldn't necessarily classify as a faster track or one where, that takes place. But I think there's a lot of discipline at Darlington. And I think there's a lot of discipline at Michigan that a lot of people don't give Michigan credit for. So I'm going to say Brandon Jones is sort of my wild card. In terms of Cup, I was thinking about this earlier today because I figured you might ask me this. And I want to say in recent years, I've liked Toyotas at Michigan, but I don't know that I liked them this year because really up until Pocono, they've sort of not really put together a really dominant performance and finished the job. They had good, they had a good run at Las Vegas. It got away from under their feet. They had good a run at Richmond, but I don't feel like they were really dominant. I didn't see them really winning Richmond. And I feel like they really only won it on strategy. So I want to say that I'm not going to pick a Ford. I think I'm going to go with a Chevrolet. And I think I'm going to go with Ross Chastain. This track suits him, I feel like, pretty well. He's an aggressive driver. You need to attack these corners relentlessly, right? You need to be Michigan on the edge of control at all times. When you're in the corner and you are sliding, I mean, I don't know, you saw the pass he pulled on Reddick at Indy. It wasn't for a win, but, that's the type of car control you need that we don't see often at Michigan. And I think he's got it. And I think he can do really well. The Trackhouse team also just seems to have been doing well at these larger, faster tracks. They were running well at Darlington. Again, I know not really a larger or faster track, but, sort of in that range where it's the same size as a track like Charlotte, where Suarez and Chastain led laps, and similar to those racetracks, Atlanta as well. So I look for Ross Chastain to maybe try and close that point gap a little bit to Chase Elliott, see maybe if he can get back into that regular season championship hunt. Underdogs. I can't even believe I'm saying his name is an underdog, but I'm for these two reasons. For the fact that he has not performed super great at these larger, faster tracks really this season, as well as for the fact that he's just in a slump. And Ford does not seem to be doing very well at these larger, faster tracks with the exception of the plates. I'm going to pick Kevin Harvick. I know he's not really a name that is like an underdog. I feel very wrong saying it, but I also don't think he's a favorite. Certainly not with the way he's performed. Ford has sort of struggled this season, but I think maybe this is the weekend. Harvick's had some success. He swept the races here in 2020 when it was a doubleheader weekend. So I think if he's going to win, this is probably his best weekend to do it because Richmond, I know he's had some success there, but it's been a while. Watkins Glen, I mean, that's no good. That's not a good track for Harvick. And then Daytona, I mean, Daytona's a crapshoot. You could end up in victory lane. You could wreck. You could be leading and then wreck. So I would say if he wants a more safe bet of winning, he's got to do it this weekend. Between the motivation and the drive and maybe a little bit of luck, he'll get there.
I knew you were going to pick Kevin Harvick. I just had that feeling. It's probably why we're friends because we are on the same wavelength. Because it's like, yeah, I didn't know about the Ross Chastain. I'm like, oh, once you started going into the bit, I'm like, he's like, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm like, he's going to say Kevin. He said Kevin. Oh God, what am I going to do here? In regards to the winner here, I mean, before we go on to the IndyCar, I mean, you were going to mention Austin Hill making his Cup Series debut. So a third RCR car, which I find interesting since Austin Dillon needs to win to get into the playoffs. So interesting call there. He's been good at this racetrack, Austin Dillon, over his career amongst all three series, but Austin Hill making his Cup Series debut in a third RCR car. Gagson's going to be in the 16 car for Colleague. JJ Ailey will be in the 15 car. And BJ McLeod driving in Michigan State. Partly sponsored number 77. Other than that, McLeod's back in his 78. So there's no issue in that. who am I going to pick? Am I going to pick the guy that until last week had a bunch of top two finishes in a row? Picking Clyde is easy in this spot. I don't feel Clyde. I'm feeling Blaney. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's his history speaks to being able to win in this spot. Not because Ford has done anything to make you think that they can win, because Ford's been garbage most of this year. The only guys that have won, other than Logano, who's won twice, and to be fair, he can get into how he's won, but especially at Gateway. Blaney needs a win just to solidify his spot, and in turn, it would give him the freedom to run for playoff points and stages and the whole thing. It's a house that Penske built. It would be a big deal for Ford to go and win there, considering what their season has been. So I'm going to say Ryan Blaney gets another win at Michigan. That's good for Menards. They're a Midwest company, so if he goes and gets that win there, it would be good. In regards to a wild card, why not? I'll go and say it, piss people off. Darrell Walsh Jr., because he is a guy that likes this racetrack. He's on a run. If his teammate comes back, Kurt Busch, I think all eggs are going to be put to move both these guys back up, because of course Kurt has performed generally, the inconsistencies of the organization notwithstanding, the 45 cars performed well enough to belong in the playoff, even if you want to go and say it's not been consistent over the whole entire year. But you could say that about a lot of the guys that are in this playoff. Bubba Wallace is on a run, and he's never been in a run like this in his Cup career. He's riding high. He knows he's got his soulmate. He's going to marry her at the end of the year. He wants to go and get in this playoff, make some big cash, get some bonuses, the whole thing, make it rain. And Michigan International Speedway is a place where he has made it rain before and then got pranked by his best friend on the Glass Case of Emotion podcast, which was hilarious. You're with Wayne, Garth, and Cassandra here on the case. That's one of the greatest bits ever. Because, and then Blaney broke way too early. He's like, are you talking beer care? You talking about, and then he completely, you fucking asshole. I noticed you, Ryan. I knew your voice right there. If he goes and wins at Michigan, what's going to be the next way they're going to go and move the goalpost? We've already went 3.5 hours. Like, how are they going to move the goalpost this time? If he goes and wins at Michigan, let's see that. Come on. I hang out with people that hate Bubba Wallace. I want him to win. I go because the guy has a "Let's Go Brandon" sticker, "Let's Go Brandon" hat. The whole thing. He's a freaking asshole banker, and he's the cheapest bastard. One of the cheapest bastards I've ever seen. It's like, you fucking cocksucker. You're cheap, and you talk about "Let's Go Brandon." It's like you live in New Jersey. Oh, I'm going off on a tangent about Bubba, "Let's Go Brandon," Brandon Brown, everything. The fact is, so I took the super BFFs, Ryan Blaney to win, and Darrell Walsh Jr. as my wild card. And then for the IndyCar race at Nashville this coming weekend, there's the Big Machine Records Music City Grand Prix. It'll be in the afternoon, 3 o'clock on NBC. So the Cup race, of course, will be on USA. They've made adjustments to the track a little bit. The starts and restarts will be on the one side of the bridge. So that's good in regards to not causing massive carnage. They haven't announced the full grid. They haven't posted the full grid, but Simona Di Silvestro will be in the race this weekend for Pareto Autosport and Ed Carpenter Racing. I was talking about how Ed Carpenter Racing could play a big role in the silly season because of how things are going at the moment. I'm trying to think of what would be in there. They got Nashville. So for me, they only have NASCAR. Damn it. In regards to the picks for this race for IndyCar, I would go and say, Will Power is leading the points right now, and the session reports race drivers. Yeah, right now we go and look at, you got Long Beach, St. Petersburg, Palou, and Scott McLaughlin won there. Barber's Road Course, Grand Prix of Indy, Indianapolis 500, and then there's a Belle Isle. Saw Will Power win that race. So I kind of feel like Will Power is going to win. Makes me nauseous saying it, but last year, going back into last year's results, I should do that, but I think Will Power goes and wins on Sunday at Nashville, qualifies well because he always seems to do that at road courses. The wild card pick to go and do something crazy on the streets of Nashville, to me, would be, because I'm picking anybody outside of the top 10 in current points. So that I would have loved if Colton Herta was just outside of the top 10. I'm going to pick Rinus VK, who was just outside of the top 10. A guy who's in play in free agency. I think he would be a guy to look at. So 2 Chevy guys. To be fair, should give a Honda person a look. Need to go through this. Ericsson's second in points. He's only 9 points back. Dixon's
and the defending race winner.
Yeah.
I do remember that because I remember when he just about turned over, and then 3 hours later I saw that he won.
Yeah, he launched himself over the back of the 14 car of Sebastian Bourdais, and then next thing you know, he won the effing race. It tells you how crazy Indy cars are, but Ericsson knows how to go and do things. For a guy who's quiet, and I can't even remember his name, I figure out a way to forget his name all the time, and he's an Indianapolis 500 champion. That's pretty sad. But for a Honda driver, I would say Colton, because he dominated this weekend, this Nashville racetrack, qualified on pole, dominated the race, binned the fucking car while leading. He's done that multiple times before. He's a guy, he's not in the championship, so he's running on house money. He can go make something happen. He'll pick Colton Herta. So 2 out of 3 people that make me want to puke. On that transition, I'll give it to you, Joe. Thanks for filling in. We definitely went longer because we definitely went more detailed, for sure. But thanks for holding on, doing your thing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate
it. Let us know where we can find your content.
Yeah, sure. So actually, before I get to that, I want to throw out 2 more pieces of news. I pulled out my Dale Jr. Lumina because today they announced that Dale Jr. is going to drive this 3-car, again, sponsored by Sundrop, on August 30th and 31st at North Wilkesboro Speedway when the Cars Tour goes over there. We previously already knew that Junior was going to race. We did not have a car sponsor, but it's going to be pretty much the exact replica. So I may have purchased a diecast today. And the other piece,
I'm doing the same thing.
This actually happened while we were on air. Ryan Newman won the modified race, the first ever race back at North Wilkesboro while we were on air. So doing pretty hot for someone who's not in Cup anymore, man.
The guy that should have been the SRX champion.
Won some races in SRX, won some at North Wilkesboro now. So pretty cool. But anyway, didn't want to get too far off topic. Thanks again for having me. You can find me, my main Twitter, where I tweet out everything NASCAR and a lot of points, a lot of mid-race updates. That's Passero Jr., Passerojr. And then I'm also going to pull up, I still have not posted anything. I'm getting ready to, because as you saw, Phil, I shared some Pocono pictures with you, and I plan on getting those onto the Instagram fairly shortly here. I've had a few other things that have come up since then, but that's going to be j.p.media_. It was the only thing that was available. If you're able to see it to the camera, there it is. If not, then it's, again, j.p.media_. So that's going to be photography, not just NASCAR, not just racing, but will be fun. So thanks again for having me. It's always fun coming on here. I enjoy it. Podcasting is something I often say I need to get more into, and then I never do. So, but thanks again. It's been fun, and hopefully I'll be back. I hope we're going to have a very interesting 4 weeks for NASCAR, at least. I can't, again, speak to too many of the other divisions, but I think we're going to have a very interesting time with the NASCAR Cup Series over the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, Formula One's on break. We're going to have international motorcycles, at least on MotoGP side, they're going to be back. In regards to IndyCar, this season's going to be ending here in the next 6 weeks. So IndyCar's Fast and Furious, there'll be like a week or a couple week break here and there to end this season. There'll be a break after Nashville, and then they'll have Gateway, and then I think there'll be a break, and then they'll run the last 2 races of the season at Portland and Laguna Seca, so that they're not battling with football, same way as golf. So they're scheduling their situation the same way as golf in a sense, but they could still package it a little differently and then go to different racetracks. That's a whole discussion for another time, which we would have here on the Grip Strip Podcast, which you can find on all different areas where you have podcasts. Any place you have podcasts, you can find the Grip Strip Podcast. You can find me at Philip G. Matthew. You can find Joe on his socials. You can find Josh on JP Huffine. He is on Twitch TV/usailor2. You can Philip G. Matthew on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me at philipgmatthew.com, where the show is posted. We're on youtube.com, Grip Strip Podcast. We'll have the video feed of that. I'll be doing both of those this week, so we'll see how that works. But with that, thanks, Joe, for coming on. It was a great discussion. Went through a lot of things. Spent a lot of, I think that's as long as we've ever talked about a NASCAR race on here, I think, for sure, at least for a while, considering what Indianapolis was this year. But hey, that's why the GSP is what it is. It's a good listen. If you're working in the middle, if you're working a 9 to 5, it's a perfect show for you. So thanks to everyone that listens, downloads, and to people that want to be involved. If you're on CircleBDiecast.com, use the code GSP28 to get savings on your shipping now, the way things are because of the U.S. Postal Service being fucked up because of orange aid. You'll get $5 off on your shipping if you use GSP20, code GSP28. You can go and we have a hookup in regards to tickets for the rest of the season. If you are interested, go and hit us up on our socials. Hit me up at Philip G. Matthew on Twitter, Philip G. Matthew28 on Instagram. If you're interested in trying to get hookups for tickets for the rest of the season, we have a connection to possibly go and attend races here during the second half of the NASCAR Cup Series season. So with that, for Joe, I'm Phil. Thanks for listening to Grip Strip Podcast. We'll be back next week for episode 128. Go over everything that went on this past week and get into what's going on next week as well. And football, because we're going to have preseason football coming on as well. So, and we have to preview the fantasy football because the Fall Brawl League will be drafting. So we'll have some talk about that. Josh will be back on. We'll see. Maybe we'll have a trio. Joe will be on, but we'll figure out how all that will work next week for the Gripster podcast. So thanks for listening. Take care. Goodbye.